Hello! If you're visiting for the first time, it's fantastic to have you here. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. This video features mostly true scary stories with the sound of gentle rain in the background. If you're looking for something to help with sleeplessness, anxiety, or stress, you're in the right place. If you enjoy the stories, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. Thank you for being here. I have something super special just for you. Ever wondered if ghosts could be real? What if they help solve crimes? Creepy, right? Today, I'm taking you on a spooky journey that might make you believe in the unbelievable. I promise you'll be glued to the screen. So don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from in the comments below. And hey, before we dive into the chills and thrills, I want to share an amazing weight loss supplement. Imagine losing weight while you sleep without even having to lift a finger. Sounds magical, right? Click the link in the description below to learn more about this incredible product. Now, let's jump into the mysterious world of ghosts and crime solving. Some time ago, I found myself in a tiny town with a big secret. The air felt thick and heavy, like something was watching me. It all started when I heard about a local mystery, the case of the missing treasure. People said it was hidden by a man who vanished a long time ago, leaving everyone puzzled. I wandered through the old streets, feeling chills run down my spine. The shadows seemed to dance around me, whispering secrets long forgotten. As I listened closely, I began to hear stories about a ghost that roamed the town, searching for its lost gold. One night, as I was exploring an abandoned house, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. Suddenly, I saw a flicker of light. My heart raced. Was it the ghost? The stories claimed it would only appear when someone was nearby, searching for answers. Creeping closer, I noticed a strange shape glowing softly in the corner. As I stepped closer to the glowing shape, my heart beat louder than ever. My breath caught in my throat when I finally saw what it was. It was a shimmering figure, a man dressed in old clothes that looked like they came from another time. His face was pale and had a sad look, like he was searching for something lost. "Who are you?" I whispered, feeling both scared and curious. The ghost turned slowly, and I felt a chill run through me. His eyes were deep and hollow, but they locked onto mine. "I'm searching for my treasure," he said softly. His voice was like a faint breeze, barely making a sound. "I cannot rest until it finds the light again." My heart raced. I remembered the stories the townsfolk told me about this man. They said he had hidden gold somewhere in town before he disappeared. Could it be true? He lifted his hand slowly, pointing towards the dark corner of the room, where broken furniture lay in shadows. "It is buried beneath the old oak tree, but beware," he warned. "The place is haunted by shadows. They do not like to be disturbed." My mind raced. Did I dare to go find it? As I stood there, the air suddenly felt colder. The lights flickered, and I could hear whispers echoing in my ears, voices that seemed angry and restless. Were those the shadows the ghost spoke of? I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, but I also felt a strange pull to uncover the mystery. I took a deep breath and decided I had to follow the ghost's clues. With the ghost hovering by my side, I stepped outside into the moonlit night. The trees stood tall and dark, casting long shadows across the ground. The faint glow from the ghost lit my path as we walked towards the old oak tree. When I reached the tree, I felt an uneasy feeling wash over me. The branches twisted like skeletal hands reaching out to catch me. The moonlight danced between them, creating eerie shapes that made me jump at every sound. I knelt down, digging my fingers into the cool, damp soil. I could feel the ghost standing close, his energy swirling around me like a soft wind. What will I find? I thought, feeling both excited and terrified. As I dug deeper into the ground, I heard a sound that froze my heart. It was a low growl, deep and rumbling from within the darkness. I paused, glancing around. My senses were on high alert, and I felt like I was being watched. Then, without warning, the shadows around the tree began to shift. Dark figures emerged, twisting and swirling, their voices rising in an angry chorus. "Leave our treasure," they screamed. My pulse quickened as I realized these were the spirits that haunted this place. They didn't want me here. They wanted to keep their secrets hidden forever. In that moment, I knew I had to act fast. The ghost beside me urged me on. You must find it. Use the light. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it towards the shadows. The beam cut through the darkness, causing the figures to hiss and retreat into the trees. It felt strange, like I was battling something real and supernatural all at once. Suddenly, my hand struck something hard beneath the earth. I quickly brushed away the dirt, and to my shock, I uncovered a small weathered box. It was adorned with rusty old locks. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows surged forward again, trying to claim what was mine. Hurry! The ghost urged, his voice trembling with urgency. With trembling fingers, I worked on the lock, my heart pounding like a drum. Each sound from the shadows sent chills through me. Just as I managed to pry it open, a loud cacophony erupted around me. The angry spirits swirled and roared, their faces contorted with rage. I opened the box, revealing glowing coins radiating an otherworldly light. But before I could take a closer look, the shadows lunged at me, like a swarm of angry bees. I felt icy tendrils grab at my arms, pulling me back. I struggled, trying to hold onto the box, but their grip was too strong. Release it. You must let it go. The ghost shouted. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The whole scene felt like a nightmare come to life. Just then, with a rush of clarity, I realized that the treasure was not just gold, but also a heavy burden of unfulfilled spirits. The moment I decided to let go of the box, the shadows screamed in fury. Their angry faces twisted, and I could see their true forms, lost souls trapped in a cycle of sadness. I watched in awe as the coins floated back into the box, and the spirits began to fade. A bright light burst forth from the chest, illuminating the entire area. The ghost next to me smiled, his sadness lifting. You have freed us, he whispered. The shadows retreated, their anger replaced by relief. As the last of the darkness slipped away, I felt a warm peace settle in the air. The ghost nodded at me, gratitude shining in his eyes. I understood now that the treasure needed to be buried and cared for, allowing the spirits to rest. This experience would forever change me. I started to walk away, feeling lighter, but suddenly I heard a soft voice calling my name. Thank you, it echoed in the night. Just before the spirit vanished into a soft glow, I stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling into my bones. I had faced the darkness and uncovered a truth that many were too afraid to see. But even as I made my way back home, a lingering thought haunted me. Were all secrets in this town truly solved? Or was there more waiting in the shadows? What other ghosts needed my help? Even as I made my way back home, a lingering thought haunted me. Were all secrets in this town truly solved? Or was there more? Waiting in the shadows? What other ghosts needed my help? The night felt heavy, like a thick fog wrapping around me. The streets were strangely quiet, and the only sound was my footfalls echoing in the darkness. As I walked, I could not shake the feeling that something was watching me again. I turned around, expecting to see the ghost or one of the angry shadows, but there was nothing. Just the moon shining down, casting silvery light on the cracked pavement. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just my imagination. But I could feel it, the shiver running up my spine, the hairs on the back of my neck standing tall. When I reached a small park, I noticed an old swing set creaking in the wind. The swings moved back and forth, even though there was no one around. My heart raced as I stepped closer. I remember the stories I had heard about this park. They said it was haunted by a child who went missing years ago. People claimed they could still hear her laughter echoing through the trees, but it was a laughter filled with sorrow. As I stood there, listening to the eerie creaking of the swings, I heard it, a soft giggle, like a whisper carried by the wind. My heart dropped. It was a child's voice, sweet but filled with an unsettling sadness. I looked around, but the park was empty. The shadows stretched longer, cold and thick. Hello, I called out, my voice shaking. Is someone there? The giggle came again, and I felt a chill pass through me. It was so real, I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Instinctively, I turned to the swings. They were still moving, and the sound was almost like a song, luring me closer. Just as I approached, I saw a small figure sitting on one of the swings, swaying back and forth. She was dressed in a white dress, with hair that fell in messy pigtails. Her face was pale, almost glowing in the moonlight, but it was her eyes that sent fear into my heart. They were wide and sad, as if she had been waiting a long time for someone to notice her. She looked right at me. "Help me," she whispered, her voice soft like the breeze. "Help you?" I replied, barely able to speak. "What do you need?" "I can't leave until someone finds my treasure," she said, her voice fading like smoke. I felt a lump in my throat. This child's spirit wanted something, just like the man from before. I knew I had to help, but fear gripped me. What if I couldn't handle this? "Where do I find your treasure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The little girl pointed down the path with a small, bony finger. "In the old well," she said, her voice trembling. "It's dark and deep, and I am scared to go there." Every instinct in me screamed to run away, to forget this place and this little spirit. But I couldn't abandon her. I felt connected to her pain. So I nodded slowly, even as my heart pounded loudly in my chest. As I walked towards the old well, the night grew darker. Shadows danced around me, whispering secrets of the past. The air turned heavy, making it hard to breathe. When I finally reached the well, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. It loomed before me, cracked and covered in vines. The moonlight barely touched its dark opening. What if there are more angry spirits down there? I thought, feeling the weight of fear on my shoulders. But the girl's sad eyes lingered in my mind, pushing me forward. I knelt beside the well, peering into the blackness below. It felt like a dark tunnel, sucking in all the light around it, filled with echoes of long-lost voices. "Hello," I called into the depths. "Is anyone down there?" My voice bounced back, swallowed by silence. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed a small rock, ready to let it drop in to see how deep it was. As I dropped the stone, I listened closely, but instead of a faint splash, I heard a rich, deep echo. It was unsettling. I felt the ground tremble beneath me, as though something big was shifting deep inside the well. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow swirled at the edge of the well, rising up like smoke. Fear gripped me, and I stumbled back, nearly falling over. The shadow rose into a figure, tall and dark, with glowing eyes that stared right at me. "You shouldn't be here," it growled, its voice like thunder. "Leave now, or you will pay the price." I scrambled to my feet, panic flooding my mind. The little girl's helpless face flashed before me. I couldn't run. I couldn't give up. "No!" I shouted, my voice shaky. "I'm here to help." The shadow hesitated, as if considering my words, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Help?" It echoed, mockery dripping from its tone. "What can you do? You are just a child. I may be young, but you don't scare me." I yelled back, surprising even myself. "I'll find the treasure and set her free." With those words, I felt a surge of bravery. The shadow stepped closer, and I could feel an overwhelming darkness pressing around me. I could barely breathe. "Very well," it sneered. "But know this. If you fail, it will be your spirit to haunt this place forever." Without waiting for a reply, it vanished into the darkness, leaving me trembling. I took a deep breath, urging myself to be brave. Whatever was down there had to be confronted. While the fear was still heavy in my chest, I turned my attention to the well again. "Where is it?" I thought, trying to focus. Suddenly, I remembered stories I had heard about hidden treasures. They were often in chests, marked by signs from the past. Maybe there was something like that down here. Gathering all my courage, I climbed closer to the edge of the well. I could see a faint glimmer far down in the shadows. It looked like something was reflecting the moonlight. Maybe that was the treasure the girl was talking about. Heart racing, I leaned in closer. Just then, the wind blew hard, sending a chill through my body and nearly knocking me off balance. I gripped the stones tightly, determined not to fall. My eyes widened as the dark edges of the well seemed to swirl, morphing into shadows with faces of lost souls. "You should not disturb us," they whispered loudly, their voices a terrifying chorus. But amidst the chaos, I could hear the little girl's voice calling me softly. "Help me, please." Taking a deep breath, I leaned in further, reaching out towards the faint light. It was a small old box, just sitting at the bottom of the well, surrounded by darkness. With every ounce of strength, I bent low and grabbed onto a sturdy vine that hung from the edge. Shaking, I lowered myself down, feeling the cool air rush past me. The whispers grew louder, and a sense of dread washed over me. But I couldn't stop now. I was so close to helping her. I stretched as far as I could, and my fingers grasped the edge of the box. My heart pounded violently as I pulled it towards me. Suddenly, the shadows grew fierce, swirling around me like a storm. "Leave it," they screeched, their voices a haunting echo of despair. I pulled harder, ignoring their fury. With one last, determined tug, I managed to pull the box free from its resting place. The shadows screamed, and I could feel them pulling at me, trying to keep me attached to the well. I fought against their grasping fingers and started to climb back up, the box clutched tightly in my arms. The whispers became desperate cries, echoing in my ears. "No, you cannot take it." With all my strength, I reached the edge of the well and pulled myself up. I rolled away, breathing heavily, heart racing with fear and adrenaline. There, in the moonlight, the old box lay next to me. I opened it slowly, my hands still shaking. Inside were beautiful, sparkling gems and golden trinkets, shining as if they were alive. But I realized it wasn't just the treasure that was important. It was the girl's freedom. I turned to the empty part behind me and spoke firmly. "I found it. I will bring it to you." As I placed the box on the ground, the little girl's spirit appeared again, her eyes wide with hope. "You did it." Her voice was filled with joy and relief. I could see that happiness grow within her as I held the treasure before her. But before I could react, smoke began to swirl around me again. The anger of the shadows grew wild, closing in. The spirits began to scream, furious that I had taken the treasure away from them. "You cannot escape," they howled. "Leave her alone," I yelled, as the ghostly figures lunged. I didn't know what else to do. With the gems sparkling before me, I suddenly understood. This treasure belonged to the girl. I had to return it to her. In a moment of bravery, I shoved the box towards her. "Please take it. It belongs to you. This is your treasure." The shadows fought against me, trying to pull the box away. But I kept pushing it forward. The moment the girl reached out for it, the swirling darkness slowed just a little. Her spirit took the box in her hands, and I could see the light around her brightening. Thank you, she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. With the treasure in her grasp, the angry shadows began to waver. The light from the box surged brightly, pushing the darkness back. "You did well, brave one," the girl called out, her form glowing more and more. "You set us free." As I watched, the shadows screamed one last time, their faces twisting with anger. They began to dissolve into the night as the spirit of the little girl rose higher, her form glowing brilliantly. With a final flash, she smiled at me. "Goodbye. Thank you for your courage." The darkness evaporated, the whispers ceased, and I was left standing in the park, the silence settling around me. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as the air grew calm. Whatever darkness had held the spirits captive was finally gone. But as I turned to leave, a question lingered in my mind. How many more spirits were out there, waiting for someone to help them? What else did this town hide in its shadows? I walked home slowly, my heart still racing, but now knowing I had the power to make a difference. The night felt different, a little brighter, a little safer. But I also knew this was just the beginning. As I stepped into the quiet streets, I realized I needed to keep an eye out for more mysteries in the dark. As I walked home slowly, my heart still racing, I knew I had the power to make a difference. The night felt different, a little brighter, a little safer. But deep down, something twisted in my gut. Shadows danced at the corners of my eyes, like they were waiting for me to turn around. I could feel them lurking. Every sound echoed loudly in the stillness. Branches rustled, and the wind swept through the trees, mixed with faint whispers that chilled me. I glanced back over my shoulder. The park was dark now, just an empty space filled with memories I tried to forget. What if the shadows returned? What if they were angry I had helped the girl? As I quickened my pace, the path ahead twisted and turned. It felt as if the trees were leaning closer, their branches clawing at me, attempting to pull me back into the thick woods. I stumbled once, catching myself just in time. I couldn't let fear take hold, but it kept creeping back. Threads of doubt wove through my mind. Once I reached the edge of town, I paused in front of an old house that had always surprised me. No one lived there, yet every so often I could see flickering lights dancing behind the broken windows. The townsfolk whispered stories about it being a haunted place, home to restless souls. Compelled by curiosity, I stepped closer. My heart pounded louder now, matching the rhythm of my footsteps. Pushing open the old creaky gate, I felt it squeak under my weight. A chill ran down my spine. The house loomed in front of me, its windows dark like empty eyes watching my every move. I would never forgive myself if I left without knowing what was inside. So, I crept up the stairs. Each step echoed, groaning under my weight, as if protesting my presence. I got to the door. Cautiously, I turned the rusty knob. It creaked open, revealing a dusty interior filled with shadows. The air was stale, holding the scent of decay and forgotten memories. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a rush of cold air enveloping me, prickling my skin. In the dim light, I could see old furniture draped in sheets. Dust hung in the air like ghostly figures. My heart raced, but I was determined to uncover the mystery. As I explored room after room, I found odd trinkets and faded photographs, faces staring blankly at me. They watched my every move, their silent screams echoing in my ears. Suddenly, I heard a loud thump coming from upstairs. My body froze. "Is someone up there?" I said quietly, my voice trembling. Silence answered back, but the air thickened, a heavy force pressing all around me. It felt like the house itself was alive, aware of my presence. With shaky steps, I made my way toward the staircase. It looked dark, the shadows swirling like fog, hiding whatever waited on the upper level. Each step creaked under my weight, echoing like a warning. I tried to convince myself that nothing would hurt me, but dread pooled in my stomach, growing heavier with every step. When I reached the top, I turned to the first room on my right. The door hung slightly open, inviting yet warning me. Peering inside, I saw it was a child's room, painted bright colors now faded and peeling. A small bed sat in the corner, a dusty teddy bear staring at me with dull button eyes. But that was not what caught my attention. In the center of the room, an old, ornate mirror stood tall, cracked, and covered in dust. As I approached it, I noticed something unsettling. The reflection wasn't just me staring back. There were shadows moving behind me, swirling and twisting. My heart raced at the sight. The shadows seemed to pulse, inching closer to me. "Get out," they whispered in chilling tones, their voices angry and haunting. I stepped back, panic flooding through me. Suddenly, the mirror began to shimmer, and I felt drawn toward it. Images flashed inside, ghostly figures appearing and disappearing. They looked familiar, faces of people from the town who had gone missing over the years. Their mouths opened in silent screams as they reached out for me, begging for help. "Help us," they cried, their eyes wide with fear. "You must break the glass to set us free." I felt paralyzed, caught between fear and a desperate need to help. I looked back at the shadows in the room. They were thickening, closing in like a storm. "If you don't help us, they will take you too," the figures shouted. Their voices echoed in my head, sending chills down my spine. I turned back to the mirror, desperate and determined. Gathering my strength, I grabbed a heavy object from the nearby dresser. a forgotten toy. With a deep breath, I swung it hard against the glass. The mirror shattered with a deafening crack, shards scattering like dancing butterflies. The air exploded with energy, a whirlwind of light surrounding me. The shadows howled in fury, their anger a deafening roar, swirling around the room. As the glass shattered, the ghostly figures surged forward, their hands reaching for freedom. The wind spun faster, swirling the shadows into chaos. "No!" they screamed, fighting against the pole of the shattered mirror. The faces of the missing people began to fade into the swirling light, their expressions a mix of relief and sorrow. I felt the ground tremble as the shadows lunged toward me, trying to drag me into their abyss. I stood my ground, heart racing, determined not to become one of them. "You don't have power over me," I shouted, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. Just then, the room burst into brilliant light, washing away the shadows. The spirits of the lost rushed through the broken glass and into the light, their faces calm and grateful. I felt a wave of warmth as they passed by me, a gentle touch on my shoulder, like a promise of hope. The shadows screamed in rage, their forms broken and dissipating like smoke. With each spirit that escaped, the dark presence weakened, retreating back into the corners of the house. I realized that in breaking the mirror, I had freed not just them, but also myself from their grasp. With the final scream, the shadows vanished completely, leaving the room still and quiet. The dust settled, and I stood there, panting, feeling a sense of peace. But as I looked around, I knew the fight against darkness was far from over. I had uncovered more than one ghostly secret, and now doorways had opened up, revealing pathways filled with stories yet to be told. Before leaving, a thought crossed my mind. Was I ready to face whatever else lingered in this town? No matter how unsettling and frightening it might be, I sensed I had no choice. Another spirit might be waiting for my help. As I stepped back down the stairs, my heart was still racing, but I felt a flicker of determination ignite within me. I couldn't ignore the shadows anymore. They were part of this world, and I had to learn how to face them. Outside, the moon hung low, casting an otherworldly glow over the town. I took a deep breath and promised myself I wouldn't turn away from the darkness. As I took a deep breath and promised myself I wouldn't turn away from the darkness, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. The town's familiar sights now seemed unwelcoming, shadows hiding behind each street lamp. Every corner felt like it held a secret, an untold story waiting for me to uncover it. I walked carefully, glancing around me. The hairs on my neck stood up, as if someone was following me. I turned to see if anyone was behind, but just the darkness stared back, wrapping around me like a thick fog. The streets were deserted, and a silence hung in the air, heavier than before. It felt as if the town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Then I heard it, the faint sound of music drifting through the darkness. It was a soft, eerie melody, almost like a lullaby. I felt drawn to it, pulled toward the sound like a moth to a flame. What could it be? Where was it coming from? The curiosity gnawed at me, and against my better judgment, I followed the haunting tune. I made my way down an unlit alley, the shadows pressing in closer. The melody grew louder, echoing off the brick walls. I could see a flicker of light at the end of the alley, like a candle's glow. My heart raced. Was it another spirit in need of help? Or was it something more sinister? As I stepped closer, I noticed strange symbols painted on the walls, spirals and shapes that seemed to shift if I stared at them too long. The hairs on my arms raised, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Just as I reached the end of the alley, the light flickered out, plunging everything into darkness. I hesitated, listening. The music stopped suddenly, leaving a heavy silence that pressed against my ears. Panic tried to grip me, but I forced myself to take a step forward. Then, the shadows moved. From the darkness, a figure emerged, cloaked in dark robes that flowed like smoke around it. It moved silently toward me, a shrouded silhouette with no discernible features. My heart pounded loud in my ears. and I fought the urge to turn and run. "Who are you?" I gasped, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure halted, and in a voice like rustling leaves, it spoke. "I am a seeker of souls, a collector of dreams." My heart raced faster. "What do you want from me?" "Your strength is needed for a greater purpose," it replied, the tone both soothing and unsettling. "There are things lost in the shadows that need your light." I felt the weight of its words, and doubt crept in. I didn't want to be part of anyone's plans. But as I looked into the endless darkness around me, I wondered if I truly had a choice. "Will you help?" the figure asked, extending a hand toward me. Even though I couldn't see its face, I felt the weight of its gaze, piercing and unyielding. I hesitated, weighing my options, but then I remembered the girl from the park. Her sad eyes lingered in my mind. She needed help, and maybe this was my chance to rescue more lost souls. I nodded slowly, feeling both fear and determination welling up inside me. The figure smiled with unseen lips, an expression that sent shivers down my spine. "Come with me, then." As I stepped forward, it turned and led me deeper into the shadows, down another narrow path filled with swirling mist. With each step, I felt the air grow colder, and the music returned, louder than before. It felt out of place, like a siren's song luring me into the unknown. We soon arrived at an old, weathered building that loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. It looked like an abandoned theater, its once bright marquee now faded and cracked. The doors creaked open as my guide gestured for me to enter. Inside, the atmosphere changed completely. The air was thick with dust and whispers. It felt alive, watchful. The stage at the front was set, even though nobody was there. Torn curtains hung limply, and a strange light flickered from nowhere, casting long shadows across the floor. "Here lies the place of stories untold," the figure murmured, gliding forward. "Every soul that has walked these floors holds a part of the darkness. They linger, trapped between worlds, waiting for someone like you." I swallowed hard, weighing the implications of joining this eerie gathering. "But how can I help?" "Find the heart of the darkness," it instructed. "It hides here in the shadows of forgotten dreams. You must face it to free the lost souls." With that, the figure melted back into the shadows, leaving me standing alone on the creaking floor. A chill ran through me as I looked around. The faint whispers of lost souls surrounded me, echoing their pleas. "Please free us. Don't let us fade. Help." A sudden crash echoed from the back of the theater, and I whipped around, startled. Shadows swirled, coiling and weaving in the dim light. I could see shapes flickering in and out, the outlines of figures urging me forward into the darkness. Without thinking, I took slow steps toward the sound. My heart pounded harder with each movement, the whispers growing louder. There, behind a torn curtain, I spotted a faint light that pulsed like a heartbeat. What could it be? Was that the heart of the darkness? Taking a deep breath, I pushed aside the curtain. The light burst forth, filling the room with a blinding glow. I had to shield my eyes. As the brilliance faded, I could see it, a large, glowing orb suspended in the air, filled with swirling colors and silhouettes. And within those shapes, I recognized the faces of the lost souls, their mouths forming silent cries. I stumbled back, fear gripping me tight as the orb began to pulse more violently. Whatever trapped them couldn't be good. Suddenly, a cold wind blew through the theater, knocking me off my feet. I landed hard on the ground as the shadows around me swirled into a vortex, an angry storm of darkness. The whispers transformed into screams of rage and despair. "Leave this place. You're not welcome," they howled, the sound crashing over me like a tidal wave. I staggered to my feet, heart racing. I couldn't let their fury stop me. I had to reach the orb and free the souls trapped inside. Gathering all my strength, I charged towards the glowing light. Shadows clawed at me, scratching my arms and yanking at my clothes, trying to pull me back. But I pushed through the storm, ignoring the pain as I reached out toward the orb. It felt warm against my skin, pulsing with life. "I'm here to help," I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. The orb twitched, as if it understood my intent. With one last desperate effort, I grasped the orb in my hands. A surge of energy coursed through me, filling every part of my being. Colors exploded before my eyes, and the souls trapped inside surged towards me, faces shifting and morphing into one another. "Thank you. Free us," they cried, their voices blending into a symphony of anguish. The shadows shrieked in rage, trying to reclaim what they were losing. I could feel their grip weakening, though. The light around me grew fiercer, and colors swirled faster, engulfing me in a radiant glow. Just as I began to feel hope, a dark figure emerged from the whirlpool of shadows, its eyes glowing like embers. "You think you can save them? You will fail," it bellowed, a thick voice full of fury. I felt fear wash over me, but I had no time to think. "No!" I yelled back, channeling every ounce of courage within me. "I will not let you keep them." As I held the orb tighter, a shockwave erupted, sending the dark figure staggering back. Spirits of the lost began to swirl around me, merging their energy with the light. I felt a connection form, a bond between souls, driving away the shadow's grasp. With a final surge of power, I shouted, "Be free!" The orb exploded in a blinding flash, casting out light in every direction. The remaining shadows shrieked, begging and crying for mercy as they evaporated into the wind. I watched, breathless, as the trapped souls burst forth from the orb, their faces now peaceful and free. They streamed away into the night, disappearing into the stars. As the last of the shadows faded, I collapsed onto the floor, completely drained but alive. The theater was silent, filled with a soft glow, remnants of their whispers still echoing around me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. There were more stories hidden in the shadows of the town, more souls waiting for someone to help them. I had confronted the darkness and emerged victorious. But now, I felt a connection to the shadows I never expected. They called to me, and I knew I would keep searching for the lost and the wandering. The road ahead would be filled with shadows and whispers, secrets waiting to be uncovered. As I sat there in the silence of the theater, recovering from what just happened, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. I had freed lost souls, but a nagging feeling crept into my thoughts. What if more darkness lingered in the world around me? What if this was just the beginning of a much larger battle? I looked around the empty room, illuminated only by the faint glow of the stage. The dust motes danced in the air, and I listened carefully, hoping to hear the whispers of the souls who had just found peace. But instead, I was met with the unsettling feeling that something was still watching me. Tension built inside me, and I slowly got to my feet. My instincts told me to leave, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the theater. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know more. What else remained hidden in the shadows? I cautiously moved towards the exit, the creaking floorboards echoing loudly in the quiet. Each step felt heavier, as if the darkness of the place was trying to pull me back. I hesitated just outside the door, feeling an urge to glance one last time at the stage. As I looked back, a chilling sight caught my eye. The orb was gone, but something else filled the space it had left behind. A dark mist was creeping out from the corners of the theater, swirling like a living thing. It twisted and turned, forming vague shapes that looked almost human, but not quite. Not yet, a low whisper echoed in my mind, sending shivers down my spine. I had a deep sense that this was not just a voice, but a warning, a reminder that battles against darkness are never truly over. I stepped back, heart racing, trying to gather my thoughts. Fear gripped me as the mist drew closer, tendrils reaching out like fingers, seeking to draw me back into its embrace. I had dealt with shadows before, but this felt different. There was a dark energy behind it, hostile and judgmental. "Leave this place," I shouted, voice trembling as I tried to push back against the encroaching darkness. The mist writhed, swirling in defiance. I felt a heavy dread settle in the pit of my stomach, the feeling that I was facing something far greater than mere shadows. Just then, I heard a familiar sound, faint, ghostly laughter echoing from within it. "Help us," the voices cried again, but this time, they were twisted and mocking. "You are not strong enough to save yourself." I had to fight back the urge to run. I forced myself to stand tall, gripping the door frame for support. "I am not afraid of you," I yelled, though my heart pounded heavily in my chest. Suddenly, a stronger gust of wind swept through the theater, snapping the silence like a fragile thread. The dark mist swirled in a frenzy, and for a moment, I swear I saw faces in the swirling shadows, contorted with rage and sorrow. They pressed against the walls, trying to escape their prison. My breath caught in my throat. I recognized them, the lost souls from before, now twisted by despair and anger. "You freed us, but we will never be free," they screamed, their voices merging into a cacophony that shook the very foundations of the building. Fueled by instinct, I bolted out of the theater, racing down the alley. Every shadow skittered away from my path, as if feeling my resolve. But the laughter still echoed behind me, each step bringing me closer to a threshold I wasn't sure I could cross. Heart pounding, I burst back onto the main street, the cool air wrapping around me like a welcome embrace. But the comfort was short-lived. The moment I stepped into the moonlight, I glanced at the park where I had helped the girl. There, among the trees, I saw flickers of movement, dark figures lurking at the edge, watching me. It was as if they were waiting for me to return, to finish what I had started. I stepped closer, squinting through the shadows, trying to see clearly. The flickering figures grew more distinct, their shapes taking on a more solid form. A chill raced down my spine. "What do you want?" I shouted, daring them to come closer. But they only laughed softly, a sound that sent shivers crawling up my arms. The laughter was both haunting and familiar, echoing memories of faces I couldn't quite place. I knew they were the ones I couldn't save, now twisted by bitterness. "Don't deny us," one figure called, stepping forward. Its form shifted unsettlingly, an ever-changing silhouette that seemed to undulate like smoke. "Join us, and we will show you how to wield the darkness." "I will never join you," I shouted back, determination mingling with fear. "I won't turn to the shadows." The figure paused for a moment, its laughter echoing in the air. "You think you have a choice? The shadows will always find you. You're a part of this now." Suddenly, the ground beneath me began to tremble, and I stumbled back as the park around me shifted. The trees twisted, their limbs reaching out like skeletal hands, trying to grasp for me. The laughter intensified, swirling around me as the other figures stepped closer, their intentions dark and twisted. It felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I turned to run, but the shadows closed in around me, their taunts growing louder. "You can't escape," they shouted, and I could feel their cold breath on my skin. Panic surged, fueling my flight as I raced through the trees with my heart in my throat. I had to find a way to break this cycle, but doubts crowded my mind. It felt like I was being pulled into a web, each step drawing me deeper into their grasp. Pushing against the overhanging branches, I stumbled again, nearly falling. But something caught my eye. There, in the distance, a faint light flickered. It felt like a beacon, drawing me closer. Ignoring the shadows, I sprinted towards it, the laughter echoing behind me, mocking my every step. I could feel their anger rising, a storm brewing as I got closer to the warmth of the light. As I neared the source, I realized it was another building. A small house, crumbling and covered in vines. But the light was bright, shining defiantly against the darkness. I rushed toward it, pounding on the door. My breaths came in ragged gasps, panic coursing through me. Just as I thought the shadows would close in, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman with eyes that held a depth of wisdom. "Come in, child." Quickly, she urged, stepping aside. I didn't need another invitation and rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind me. The inside of the house was warm and filled with strange trinkets, a stark contrast to the shadows outside. "You are in great danger," the woman said, closing her eyes for a moment. "They will follow you until their hunger is satisfied." Who are they? I asked, my voice trembling as I leaned against the door, my heart racing. Souls lost to darkness, she replied. They tether to those who feel a connection to both the light and the shadows. But you have the strength to fight them. You must confront your fears. Her words hung heavy in the air, and I felt uncertain. How could I confront them when they seemed so powerful? Just then, the shadows began pounding at the door, their antics outside growing stronger. You can't hide from us, they yelled, their voices layered with malice. What do? Despair crept into my voice as the pounding grew louder. The woman's gaze seemed to pierce through me. You must face them and find the light within yourself. Only then can you break their hold. I felt a flicker of fear in my heart, but also a spark of determination. I had faced shadows before, faced fears of the unknown. Standing tall, I held my ground and I whispered, "All right, I'll do it." The woman nodded, a proud glimmer in her eyes. When you're ready, open the door and call out to them. Stand firm against the darkness. You will find your strength. With a deep breath, I turned towards the door, gripping the handle tightly. The pounding continued, the shadows calling out, desperate to find their prey. I steadied my breath, pushing away the anxiety that clawed at me. Pushing the door open, the darkness rushed in, a whirlwind of angry voices swirling around me. You thought you could escape? You can't hide. But I held my ground, grounding myself with the knowledge that I had faced my fears before. I'm not afraid of you, I shouted, forcing myself to hold firm. The shadows stopped, their laughter replaced with eerie silence, as if they were finally forced to reckon with my resolve. Show us your strength, they screamed, and suddenly, the ground shook beneath me again, a treacherous rumble that threatened to swallow everything whole. Shaking but determined, I focused on the warmth building inside me. I will not be your prey. I am more than my fears. I yelled, the power of my voice echoing against the darkness. Slowly, a light began to grow around me, warmth spreading as the tendrils of shadows wavered. I felt my heart pounding, the flickering light growing more intense as I reached out, desperate for my own strength to shine through. Leave me alone, I cried, and the light exploded outwards, pushing against the swirling shadows, illuminating the darkness around me. They shrieked in anger, the light forcing them back, their distorted forms flickering in a desperate attempt to reclaim what they had lost. No, they screamed, you are ours. But with each heartbeat, I felt my resolve growing stronger. I am my own, I declared, pushing the light out further until it enveloped everything, filling the space with warmth and clarity. The shadows writhed, caught in the pull of the luminous power, until with one final surge, they screamed and were pulled back into the void from which they came. Breathless, I opened my eyes, realizing the clouds of darkness around me had vanished. The stars shone brightly above, a clear night free of the heavy weight I had felt earlier. I knew the shadows were still there, waiting for the chance to return, but I felt a sense of peace. I had faced them and survived. Turning back to the elderly woman, gratitude filled me. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you. She smiled kindly, her eyes glimmering with understanding. You did this. You found your strength, and now you must continue the journey. I realized she was right. The fight against darkness would never truly end. It would always exist, a constant battle between light and shadow. But now, I felt ready to explore that path. With renewed determination, I stepped back outside, ready to face whatever lay ahead, to search for more lost souls and help those in need. With renewed determination, I stepped back outside, ready to face whatever lay ahead, to search for more lost souls and help those in need. The night air felt different now, a mix of coolness and anticipation. I took a deep breath, remembering the way the shadows had swirled and laughed at me. They were still out there, lurking in the alleys and dark corners of the town. If I truly wanted to help, I needed to confront that darkness again. I wandered down the empty street, each step echoing through the chilling silence. My senses heightened, I strained to catch any unusual sounds or movements. As I made my way past the park again, I noticed the trees swaying slightly, though there was no wind. The laughter I had heard earlier hung in the air, faint but unmistakable. My heart raced as I realized I wasn't alone. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, darting between the trees. The figures I had seen before were watching me again, their eyes glimmering with malice and curiosity. "Come closer," one of them beckoned, its voice low and sweet, yet laced with danger. "We only want to show you what you're missing." I hesitated, caught in a web of fear and intrigue. The temptation to step closer to the darkness was strong. It felt almost inviting, promising something I couldn't quite grasp. "What do you want from me?" I called out, my voice firmer than I felt. "To join us," it whispered, drifting closer. "You see, we know your true nature. You have darkness in you too. Embrace it." I shuddered, pushing the thoughts away. I had faced the shadows before, and I couldn't let them gain any ground now. "I am not like you." "Is that so?" Another figure emerged, its face momentarily flickering into something horrifying, a mask twisted in despair. "You think you can escape your shadow? We are all part of the same story." I turned to run, but as I did, the ground beneath me rumbled again, and branches whipped around me like snakes, blocking my path. Fear clawed at my insides, and I realized that I was caught in their trap, a puppet in their game. "Don't resist," a chorus of voices sang, weaving through the air like a twisted lullaby. "You will find peace with us." Suddenly, a dark mist poured from the trees, surrounding me in a suffocating embrace. The shadows curled around my body, at first feeling cold, then slowly warming, as if trying to seduce me into submission. I could hear whispers blending into one another, calling my name in a haunting melody, begging me to surrender. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the tightness wrapping around me. I remembered the light I had found earlier and concentrated on that warmth inside me. I envisioned it spreading, pushing against the shadows. But the laughter grew louder, an echoing cacophony that threatened to drown me. "You're too weak," they mocked, their voices layered with disdain. "Just let go." The panic surged back. I focused harder, willing the light to shine brighter. A glowing pulse began to form around me, pushing back against the darkness. But the figures stepped closer. "To let go means freedom," one of them insisted, reaching out with a skeletal hand, fingers elongating like claws. "Just fall into us." "Stop it," I shouted, not backing down. With every ounce of strength, I concentrated on the light, feeling it pulsing with energy. "You will not control me." A blinding glow erupted from my core, expanding outward and forcing the shadows back. The stench of decay and loss filled the air, overwhelming and thick. I could feel their desperate shrieks pulling at my mind. "Foolish child, you can't escape," they roared, their forms twisting violently. But I stood my ground, breathing steadily, feeling the warmth enveloping me. The brightness surged outward, a wave that pushed the darkness to its knees. The figures were losing their form, writhing in agony as I pressed forward. "Stop," I commanded, and with that single word, the light exploded around me, an orb of radiance that swallowed everything dark. The shadows, once menacing, now struggled against the powerful wave. Suddenly, there was a flash, and they began unraveling, evaporating into nothingness. I had done it. The ground stopped shaking, and I felt a lightness in my chest, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. But just as I thought it was over, I heard a whisper slip through the air, chilling me to the bone. "You may have won this time, but we will always linger in the dark." My heart sank. No matter how many battles I fought, the shadows would always return, lurking at the edges of my reality. I took a deep breath, shaking off the fear. I wouldn't let it consume me. Turning back, I glanced toward the park, now strangely serene under the moonlight. I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. There were other places where darkness thrived, places where lost souls still cried out. "Time to move on," I whispered to myself, steeling my resolve. I stepped away from the park, determined to find those who needed help. the ones who were still trapped in the shadows of despair. As I walked down the street, I suddenly felt a heavy presence beside me. Turning quickly, I searched for any sign of danger, but nothing was there. The night felt thicker now, as if it was alive, breathing around me. With every step, I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see something lurking close behind. The unease settled in the pit of my stomach, a reminder that the battle against the darkness was far from over. But I pushed forward, determined to keep moving. I crossed into an older part of town, the buildings leaning at odd angles, their chipped paint creaking in the gentle breeze. The streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward me, eager to pull me back. Then, a sharp sound echoed through the alley to my left. Curiosity and fear battled within me, but I felt drawn to it. I stepped off the street and walked toward the source of the noise, every instinct warning me to turn back. As I entered the alley, the air grew colder, wrapping around me like icy fingers. The shadows darted along the walls, playful and mischievous, teasing my every step. And then I saw it. At the end of the alley stood a small door, partially ajar, with light seeping through the cracks. My curiosity piqued. I approached slowly, heart pounding hard against my ribcage. A feeling of dread washed over me as I neared the door, but I couldn't turn back now. I pushed the door open gently, and a wave of warmth enveloped me. The inside of the room was dimly lit, with flickering candles placed haphazardly on old crates. "What is this place?" I murmured, stepping inside. The room was filled with strange objects. Old portraits with eyes that seemed to follow me, dusty books piled high on every surface, their covers torn and faded. Beneath the surface of charm, an eerie stillness lurked. As I wandered deeper, I noticed a large mirror on the far wall, its surface tarnished and cracked. I felt an inexplicable pull towards it. I stepped closer, entranced by the reflection staring back at me. Not only my own face, but swirling mists that whispered secrets, tugging at the corners of my mind. "Look closer," a voice urged from the shadows, soft yet commanding. I stepped toward the mirror, entranced by the swirling shapes within the glass. As I looked deeper, an unsettling realization hit me. They weren't just reflections. The faces of lost souls, twisted in agony, filled the glass, reaching out toward me with desperate hands. They clawed at the barrier separating us, their mouths curled silently in anguish. "No," I gasped, stepping back, horror spilling over me. "What do you want?" "Help us," they cried silently, the words echoing in my mind. "You can free us." The shadows in the room thickened, coiling around me, pulling the energy from my body. I could feel their grasp tightening, and panic surged within me. "I can't," I shouted. "I just did this." "Do not fight it," the voice whispered again, more insistent. "This is your destiny." I trembled, fear settling deep in my bones. Just when I thought I had escaped them, they were back, taunting me with their cries. I had to break free. "You don't own me," I yelled, but they only pressed closer, feeding off my fear. The air grew heavy, charged with a dark energy that wrapped around my throat. I could barely breathe. The weight of desperation bore down like a heavy fog. "Join us," they clamored, their voices rising in a discordant symphony. "You will find peace in the dark." With a desperate gasp, I turned and fled from the mirror, the anguish still reverberating in my ears. I had to escape the confines of this insanity, this nightmare that threatened to consume me. Bursting back outside, I found myself standing in an empty street again, the cool night air hitting my face like a refreshing splash. But I could still hear their whispers in the back of my mind, relentless and demanding. I ran, the pavement beneath my feet echoing my panic. No longer was the darkness merely an enemy. It was a part of me, clawing for recognition and acceptance. I pushed forward, seeking a beacon of hope to guide me through the night, a place to gather my strength. Just ahead, I spotted a light glowing through the branches of an ancient tree. As I ran closer, I realized it came from a quaint little house nestled among the trees, its windows warm and inviting. I could sense that this place might hold the answers I needed. As I approached, the front door swung open, revealing an elderly man with a kind smile. "Come in, child," he said, gesturing me inside. "You've been through so much." Relief washed over me, and I stepped inside, eager to escape the darkness lurking just outside. "Your journey has only just begun," the man said, closing the door behind me, sealing away the night. I looked up at him, feeling a mix of hope and trepidation. "What do I need to do?" "Learn to understand the shadows," he replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "Only then can you truly help others who are lost." With a sense of purpose igniting within me, I nodded. I knew that my battle against the darkness, a battle that lived within us all, was far from over, but I felt ready to face whatever was to come. With a sense of purpose igniting within me, I nodded. I knew that my battle against the darkness, a battle that lived within all of us, was far from over, but I felt ready to face whatever was to come. The elderly man led me into a cozy room filled with books and strange artifacts. The warm glow from the fireplace flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It felt safe here, almost comforting, but I couldn't shake off the unease settling in my stomach. "Sit," he said gently, motioning to a well-worn chair. I obeyed, eager to hear what I needed to learn. "You've seen the darkness, and it knows you now. But there's much more beneath the surface. Understanding it is your key." I watched him carefully as he moved to the shelves, his fingers brushing against the spines of dusty tomes. The shelves creaked with age as he pulled one out, the cover worn and faded with time. He opened it slowly, revealing pages filled with intricate symbols and drawings. Some I recognized, others were foreign and strange. "Each page tells a story," he said softly, showing me sketches of shadowy figures entwined with bright lights. "These figures represent souls who've battled the darkness." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But they also teach us about fear, about embracing it without letting it consume you." I leaned closer, feeling intrigued. "How do I embrace it? How do I not let it take over?" "By facing it directly," he replied, eyes shining with wisdom. "You must learn its name, understand its form. Only then can you control it." As he spoke, the air grew heavier, making it hard to breathe. I glanced around, sensing the shadows creeping in from the corners of the room, gathering in thick clusters, as if they were waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and an icy draft swept through, causing me to shiver. The sound of scratching filled the air, like nails running down a chalkboard. My heart raced as the shadows inched closer, thickening around me. "Do not fear them," the man urged, his tone steady. "They are reminders. Each whisper tells a tale." I closed my eyes, trying to push the panic away. The scratching grew more pronounced, echoing off the walls, merging with the voices I had heard before. "Join us." "Let go," they hissed, weaving through the fading light. Opening my eyes again, I saw figures emerging from the shadows, their forms indistinct and wavering. Their eyes glinted with a malevolence that sent chills down my spine. "You will join us," one of them croaked, its mouth stretched into a sinister grin. "No," I shouted, gripping the arms of the chair. "I will not be one of you." The elderly man stepped forward, his presence commanding. "Hold your ground," he exclaimed. "Remember the light within you." Instinctively, I drew on that warmth again. I concentrated, pushing the energy from my chest outward, willing it to expand and shine bright against the encroaching dark. A glow enveloped my hands, illuminating the figures that loomed menacingly. They recoiled, their faces twisting in rage and fear. The scratching turned into a scream, piercing through the air as the shadows writhed in agony. "We will never leave you," they screeched, their voices blending into a chaotic harmony of despair. "You'll always belong to us." I felt the weight of those words pressing on my mind, and for a moment, doubt seeped in. What if they were right? What if I was doomed to always struggle against them? "Don't listen," the elderly man shouted, grounding me. "You have the power. They only thrive on fear." With his words, I pushed harder, the light radiating from my outstretched arms. A bright beam cut through the darkness, piercing the room and forcing the figures back. The shadows shrieked, swirling in a tempest of rage as light filled every corner, sending them dissipating into nothingness one by one. But just when I thought I had won, a heavy weight descended upon me, like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. The room darkened, and I felt a chill crawl over my skin. "You think you've won this battle?" A familiar voice echoed, deep and taunting. "You are merely a pawn in our game." I spun around, searching the corners of the room, but the shadows had faded into an ominous silence. The old man looked concerned, furrowing his brow. "They are regrouping," he whispered, the urgency palpable in his voice. "We need to prepare. What do we do?" I asked, fear gripping me once more. "We must find the source," he replied, his gaze serious. "The shadows gather strength from their master. If we can locate it, we can grasp this darkness before it overwhelms us." He moved quickly, pulling an old map from one of the shelves. It was tattered and yellowed with age, marked with symbols that made my skin crawl. "There are places in this town where the darkness is strongest," he said, tracing a finger along a section marked with a swirling black symbol. "This represents the heart of it all, a place where shadows gather and feed on fear." With my heart racing in my chest, I looked up. "How do we get there?" "Through the old cemetery," he replied softly, locking eyes with me. "It's the closest route. But be wary, child. The shadows will not let you pass easily." I nodded, fear mixing with adrenaline as I prepared to face my next challenge. The thought of heading into the cemetery thrilled and terrified me, but deep down, I knew I had to do this. We stepped outside into the cool night air once more, the familiar path winding ahead of us. As we moved, whispers rode the wind, swirling around us like a dark undertow. "You cannot escape," they whispered, weaving through the trees. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself against their chorus, willing my heart to stay steady. I focused on the warmth of the light inside me, remembering the fight I had already faced. As we approached the cemetery gate, shadows flickered in the corner of my eye, always just out of view, teasing me with their presence. I tried to ignore them, but the feeling of dread only grew stronger with every step. The gate creaked as we pushed it open, its rusty hinges protesting against the night. The cemetery was shrouded in darkness, tombstones looming like specters against the starry sky. A chilling fog hung heavy in the air, curling around the branches of ancient trees like fingers reaching out to pull me in. "I can feel them," I whispered, my voice barely carrying over the eerie silence. "They're here." The old man nodded, keeping his expression calm. "We must be quick. Focus on finding the heart." As we moved further into the cemetery, the ground felt uneven beneath my feet, the dirt squishing under my shoes. The air turned colder, almost biting, send ing prickles across my skin. I glanced around nervously, and then I saw it. A small mausoleum at the end of a narrow path, its stone facade dark and foreboding. "That's it," the man said, pointing toward the mausoleum. "We need to get inside." But as we approached, shadows gathered around the entrance, swirling like a storm, blocking our way. "Turn back," they screamed, their voices a cacophony of fear and rage. "You don't belong here." I could feel their cold breath wash over me, sending shivers down my spine. "We're not going anywhere," I shouted, trying to hold on to my courage. Without hesitation, I stepped forward, glancing back at the elderly man for support. He nodded, giving me strength. I concentrated on the warmth, summoning it from deep within me. I extended my hands toward the darkness, letting the light burst forth, bright and pure. "You will not stop us." The shadows writhed and twisted, shrieking as they recoiled from the force of my light. For a moment, I could see their true forms, twisted faces holding expressions of anger and despair. I pushed through, feeling the glow grow brighter, enveloping me in a protective embrace. But just as I thought I could break through, the ground trembled violently beneath us. The mausoleum's door slammed shut with a sudden crash, shaking the earth as the shadows unleashed a furious roar. "Foolish child," one of them howled, their voice echoing in the night. "You've sealed your fate." I stared at the closed door, fear gripping my heart. "What do we do now?" I asked, panic rising in my voice. "We must find another way," the old man urged, glancing around. "Stick close. Remember, the light is our ally." I nodded, desperate to focus on that flicker of hope. But shadows continued to swirl, surrounding us as we turned to find another entrance to the mausoleum. The whispers grew louder, mixing with the wind, until I couldn't tell where one voice ended and another began. "You belong to us, join us." They insisted endlessly, trying to weave their way into my thoughts. But I fought back, pushing their voices aside as we navigated through the chaotic darkness. "This way," I shouted, noticing a narrow side passage hidden by overgrown vines. We squeezed through as the shadows followed, slashing through the air with menacing intent. I could feel their grip closing in, but I didn't dare stop. The passageway narrowed, and with every step, the darkness surged closer, trying to envelop us completely. "You'll regret this," they hissed, as they grasped at my clothing, pulling at my limbs. "Keep moving," the old man shouted, encouraging me forward. "We're almost there." My heart pounded wildly, the pressure mounting as the darkness pressed against us like a suffocating wave. I could feel its coldness at my heels, but I pushed harder, focusing on the light that drove me forward. Then, as we rounded a final corner, I saw it. A dim light glowed at the end of the passageway, a small chamber, inviting yet foreboding. "Quickly," the man urged, and we sprinted toward the glow. As we entered the chamber, the air changed. The warmth enveloped us, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. The walls were lined with symbols, glowing faintly as if they held ancient knowledge within. But the shadows were not far behind. "You will not escape," they roared, pouring into the chamber like a thick fog. Panicking, I turned to the elderly man. "What do we do now?" "Stand together," he commanded, his voice strong. "Guard the light." We held our hands together, palms touching, and I could feel his energy mixing with mine, a powerful surge coursing between us. We concentrated on the light, focusing on the glow as it began to pulse in rhythm with our hearts. The shadows shrieked, clawing at the walls as they struggled against the brightness. "You'll pay for this," they spat, their words dripping with venom. I could see their distorted faces pressed against the light, reflecting the torment and anguish that fed them. It was terrifying to know that they thrived on our fear, but I pushed through, reminding myself of who I was. "We can't let them in," I shouted, my voice steady. "We must stay strong." The room vibrated with our combined energy, the air crackling as we fought back against the shadows. Suddenly, a shadowy figure broke through, lunging forward. Its face twisted in fury, and I felt its cold breath wash over me. "Join us," it screeched, reaching for my throat, trying to pull me into its void. I gasped, terror flooding my veins, but I focused on the warmth inside, feeling my heart beating steadily, stronger than any fear. "No!" I yelled, thrusting my hands forward, channeling all my energy. The light exploded outward, engulfing the figure, filling the space with a brilliant glow. The shadow shrieked one final time before being consumed by the light, vanishing into nothingness. But I could feel more pressing against the edges, pushing and clawing at the barrier we had created. "You cannot rid us," they cried out, their cries churning in a whirlwind of anger. Together, the elderly man urged again, his voice unwavering. We closed our eyes, focusing deeply, channeling every bit of light we could muster. The pulsing grew stronger, pushing back against the shadows, inching ever closer, threatening to collapse our fragile barrier. As the light surged, I began to hear something beneath the screams, tendrils of anguish whispering through the chaos. "Help us, save us." "Not all shadows are evil," the elderly man said, his voice filled with a mix of urgency and compassion. "Some are trapped, lost in the darkness, and they seek help just as we do. As those words sank in, a chill raced down my spine. The angered cries of darkness coiled around us like a suffocating blanket, but now they carried an eerie echo, a mix of sorrow and desperation. "Help us, please," they whispered, a haunting plea rising amidst the chaos. I hesitated, my heart pounding. But how can I tell which is which? I stammered, glancing at the man for guidance. The shadows spun menacingly, their twisted forms flickering at the edges of the light. "What if I free the wrong ones?" "Trust your heart," he replied firmly. "It knows the truth. If you listen closely, you can distinguish the fear that wants to consume you from the pain that seeks release." I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. The chaotic whispers surrounding me started to fade, replaced by a subtle rhythm that pulsed through the air. I focused harder, letting the light flow from my hands, inviting the shadows to come closer. "Show yourselves," I called out, my voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. In response, a dark figure materialized at the edge of the light. It hovered there, its form shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. I could see hints of sadness in its hollow eyes, which glistened with unshed tears. "Please," it croaked, its voice echoing with a pain that cut deep. "I'm lost. I don't want to hurt anyone. Help me find peace." A wave of empathy washed over me, and I felt the warmth inside me surge. "What happened to you?" I asked softly, not wanting to frighten it away. "I was betrayed by those I trusted," it whispered, trembling. The darkness enveloped me, chaining my soul to this cursed place. I have lain here for so long, trapped in my pain. Tears stung my eyes as I considered its words. "I will help you," I said determinedly, feeling a flicker of hope. But before I could act, another shadow lunged forward, a jagged entity that hissed with fury. "Don't listen to it." It lunged at me, aiming to snuff out the soft light that had begun to ignite. "No!" I shout. "Ed!" Thrusting my hands forward, the light surged violently, pushing the aggressive shadow back momentarily, but not without cost. The air crackled with electric fear as the angry cries intensified, drowning out the sorrowful plea. The shadows twirled chaotically, intertwining until the room became a roiling mass of black. "You think you can save that one?" they screeched, voices mingling into an ungodly chorus. "You're just a fool in a child's game." Their words pierced my resolve, and I felt doubt creeping in again. "Stop," the man urged, his senior voice steadying my swirling thoughts. "Look deeper, listen to the pain. You have the light to guide them." Taking a deep breath, I tried to focus again, letting the warmth swell in my chest. I turned back to the shadow who had pleaded for help. "What can I do for you?" I said, my heart racing. "Free me from my torment," it cried, extending an ethereal hand toward me. "Allow me to join the light." With a pulse of energy, I made a decision. "I can help you, but you must promise to let go of the pain that binds you." The figure hesitated in its form, fear flickering in those hollow eyes. "I am afraid," it admitted, trembling. "The darkness is all I know. Let the light into your heart. It will purify your soul," I urged, feeling the flickering light grow stronger within me. I reached out my hand towards it, my pulse matching the rhythm of the light. As I channeled my energy, a brilliant beam pierced the dark, wrapping around the shadowed figure. The room brightened, the warmth embracing us both as the shadow swayed, torn between fear and hope. "You can do this," the elderly man encouraged, his expression hopeful. "It's your choice. Trust your heart." In that moment, I felt a connection deeper than I had ever known. I focused harder, breathing in strength as I asked, "Will you trust me?" "Yes," the shadow whispered, its voice trembling with uncertainty. "Then let go of your pain," I said firmly. "Let the light heal you." The darkness around us vibrated with resistance, but I pushed through, pouring everything I had into the light. The shadow's form began to shift, swells of darkness twisting and unraveling as it struggled against the grip of despair. I watched as the light consumed its anguish, brightening with every ounce of fear that released its hold. The screams of the other shadows crescendoed, shrill and angry, but I remained focused, intent on freeing the one that begged for release. I will not abandon you, I called, my resolve set in stone. We will break these chains together. Then, as if a dam had burst, the energy released, flooding the chamber with an intense white light. The figure shrieked, and in that moment of anguish, I felt it shifting, the pain transforming into something pure and beautiful. With a final gasp, the shadow erupted into a cascade of light, shimmering across the darkness we had fought against. It enveloped us, coiling like a soft breeze, lifting the weight of despair. Suddenly, the angry shouts surged, their voices drowned out in an angry torrent. No, you can't. You belong to us. But as the calming light filled the chamber, the oppressive shadows writhed and shrieked, their anger turning into fear. I could feel their presence dwindling, fading like smoke caught in sunlight. I was still catching my breath when I realized the elderly man was right beside me, watching with pride as the final remnants of darkness crumbled around us. You did it, he breathed, his eyes sparkling with amazement. Now we must move quickly before they regroup. I nodded, adrenaline surging through me again as I felt a new sense of determination. Where do we go now? I asked, scanning the chamber as the last shadows dissipated into the night. Back to the heart of the darkness, he said urgently. We must confront the source, the master of the shadows, before it can regain its strength. Without another word, we raced through the passageway, the dim light guiding our way as the air thickened. But the journey back felt different now, charged with promise and hope instead of despair. As we emerged back into the cemetery, the fog had lifted somewhat, revealing the moonlight filtering through the trees. However, it didn't take long for the shadows to re-emerge, more frenzied and vicious than before, swirling violently around the mausoleum. You think you can defy us? A deep voice growled from the depths, the dreadful sound vibrating through the ground. You have merely delayed the inevitable. Together, the elderly man urged, his voice steady. Remember what you've learned. I felt my heart racing as I summoned all the light I had within me. I'm not afraid of you, I yelled, stepping toward the shadows with renewed courage. I will free those who are lost. The dark mass surged forward, trying to engulf me, but the warmth radiating from my hands pulsed as I pushed back against their fury. The glow expanded, creating a barrier that illuminated the night, pushing away the grasping shadows. But the darkness only roared louder, breaking through the pain and turning their angry faces toward me. You're a fool. You think you can break our hold? I can and I will, I shouted defiantly, stepping further into the fray, feeling the empowerment grow stronger. The shadows writhed angrily, slinging back toward me in a desperate attempt, but faltering against my determination. You will suffer for this, they screamed, swirling violently in a cyclone of rage. Suddenly, I spotted a gleam at the center of the shadows, something pulsing like a heart. That's it, I shouted to the elderly man, pointing toward the light's core. We need to reach that. Then let's do it together, he rallied, and we surged forward, the light flickering like a beacon amidst encroaching darkness. As we closed in, the ground shook violently, and shadows lashed out, trying to snatch us back. You cannot escape us, they roared, their voices rising into a furious cacophony. But with every step, I felt the glow inside me burning brighter, fueled by the courage from before. I refused to let them drag me down again. We are stronger than you, I yelled, pushing the light ahead of us, carving a path through the menacing shadows. Just as we reached the center, a massive shadow surged up before us, more fearsome and twisted than any I'd ever seen. Its eyes glinted with malice and despair, a swirling vortex of darkness that threatened to consume us whole. You are too late, it bellowed, surging forward with an awful roar. You will be swallowed into the void, just as all who have dared to stand against me. My heart raced as I locked eyes with the dark figure. Part of me wanted to retreat, to run from the terror that loomed so close. But the warmth inside me wouldn't let me falter. It surged stronger, pushing back against the powerful darkness. "Stay with me," I urged the elderly man, who stood resolutely beside me. "We can do this. I will not leave your side," he said, unwavering. And then something clicked inside me. I took a step into the darkness, holding tightly to the light within. I felt its warmth, its love, and I let it flood through me, connecting with every ounce of strength I had. With a fierce cry, I unleashed the light, channeling all the energy together into a brilliant blaze that surged outwards like a shockwave. "I will free the lost souls," I shouted defiantly, pushing against the shadow. The force exploded into the darkness, revealing the haunting faces of those shadows once trapped in despair. They wailed as the light engulfed them, transforming their agony into a wave of ether. Eel brightness that rippled across the chamber, pushing at the dark figure like a powerful tide. It shrieked, its form twisting and contorting as though it were being unraveled. "No, you will pay for this," it screeched, but now the shadows were reacting differently. As I held my ground, the despair began to shift. The anguished faces melded with the radiant light swirling around, their cries morphing into sounds of relief. They reached out towards the light, fingers stretching as if to grasp hope for the first time. "It's working," I yelled, my voice ringing with triumph. "Keep holding it." With every ounce of fear that faded, more light filled the space. The darkness recoiled, its form disintegrating into swirling remnants as the shadows began to dissolve into beams of radiant souls. "We are free," they whispered collectively, their voices harmonizing with gratitude. But the dark figure still loomed, struggling to hold its form against the overwhelming brightness. "You may have freed them, but I will remain," it vowed, rage boiling beneath its surface. "Not if I can help it," I shouted, pushing the light forward one last time, determined to erode the last remnants of that dreadful presence. The bright surge erupted, enveloping everything in the chamber, surrounding even the shadows with warmth. The dark figure writhed, screams echoing in the night, until it began to unravel completely. "And oh," it cried, its voice fading away, leaving behind a chilling silence. As the final strands of darkness melted into the void, a profound calm settled around me. I stood breathless, the air tinged with remnants of darkness, but now transformed into a space glowing with light, a sanctuary reborn. The lingering shadows had finally retreated. "We did it," I gasped, trembling, catching the relieved smile of the elderly man beside me. "Yes," he replied, pride shining in his eyes. "You have faced your fears and let the light guide you." But as I took a moment to breathe, I sensed the weight of lingering shadows on the edges of my mind. I shuddered and asked quietly, "Is it really over, or will they come back?" "They will always linger where fear exists," he acknowledged, eyes now slightly distant. "But you," he gestured toward me, "you have the power to stand against them. You can teach others how to embrace the light, to not let fear consume them." Intrigued, I nodded, feeling that newfound responsibility settle in. But there was one last flicker of dread that lingered in my heart. And what if the light begins to fade? A small smile crept across the elderly man's face, but it didn't ease the tension coiling in my stomach. "You must be vigilant," he said softly, turning his gaze toward the darkened woods surrounding us. "The shadows may not return as they were, but remnants will linger, waiting for others to sow their seeds of doubt." That thought sent a shiver through me. "So, it's not truly over?" I asked, glancing around as if shadows might leap out from behind the trees. He nodded slowly, his expression serious. "As long as fear exists, the shadows will always find a way to creep back in." I clenched my fists, unease settling deep in my chest. The night had fallen thick around us, and the chill of the air carried whispers that clawed at my resolve. "What do we do when they come back?" I wondered, feeling exposed in that moment. "Remain strong," he urged. "Trust in the light you hold. Share with others. People need hope, especially when the darkness tries to swallow them whole." Suddenly, A low rustle echoed from the tree-line, causing my heart to race. I turned sharply, my breath hitching, and saw shadowy figures moving just beyond the reach of the dim moonlight. They shifted and darted like phantoms, barely visible, but unmistakably there. A chill traveled up my spine as unease grew heavy in the air. "Can you see them?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The dark shapes contorted, twisting and shifting, their outlines blurring in and out of focus. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady yet urgent. "They are drawn to your fear." I stared at the encroaching shadows, a painful knot of dread tightening in my gut. What are we supposed to do now? My gaze darted around as the trees groaned and creaked, echoing the tension. "Listen to the light," he advised, his eyes fiercely locking onto mine. "You have to make a choice. Stand and fight, or run." The figures in the trees writhed closer, their whispers clawing at my mind, drawing on old regrets, unfulfilled hopes, and dark memories. "You will never be strong enough," one hissed, its deeply distorted voice echoing through the night. "You belong to the shadows." "No!" I screamed, willing the warmth of the light inside me to push back against the gnawing despair. "I am not afraid." As if responding to my defiance, the shadows lunged forward, shifting into grotesque faces, mouths twisted in malicious grins, eyes glinting with hunger. "But we are your fears," they taunted, their unified voices spilling over one another, filling my mind with a cacophony of dread. "You cannot escape us." I stepped back instinctively, mind racing. Panic threatened to take hold as I glanced at the elderly man, who remained resolute. "We can face this together," he urged, clasping my shoulder tightly. "Remember what you've learned." Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to focus on the light within. With every ounce of strength, I began to weave my energy into a warm glow, feeling it pulse with purpose. "Go away!" I shouted, arms outstretched, willing the light to expand, illuminating the creeping shadows. The darkness hissed and shrieked, recoiling from the brilliance I conjured. "You think that will save you?" One of the malicious figures screeched, its wicked grin widening grotesquely. "We will devour that light." I felt a rippling doubt seep in. A part of me wondered if it was futile, if this battle was lost before it began. But deep down, I clung to the belief that I had the power to push back, to shield myself from their terrors. "Together," I called out to the elderly man, determination igniting within me. "I won't let them take me." Our combined energies surged, creating an overwhelming blaze that pulsed against the darkness. It pushed forward like a wave, crashing against the grotesque forms invading our space. The hollow cries of the figures echoed, twisting into agonizing howls as they shrank away from the light. "Keep pressing," the man shouted, his voice rising above the fray. "Focus on the hope, the love, the light. Let it guide you. Let it speak." I closed my eyes, drowning in the surge of emotions. Visions danced in my mind. People I loved, happy memories, laughter flowing like a clear river breaking through stormy skies. Those memories shone bright, fueling the resolve I summoned from within. Suddenly, I felt a presence gather, a deeper connection that linked not just me to the light, but the world beyond. It stretched like threads connecting every heart that sought to break free of despair. "You are never alone," I shouted with newfound conviction. The shadows writhed in fury, growing frantic as the light strengthened around us. "No, you will regret this." They lunged forward, but I felt an undercurrent of determination surging through me, pushing the darkness back relentlessly. "Let go of the fear," I yelled, envisioning the light slicing through the heart of darkness. "You don't own me." With a final cry, I unleashed the burst of light, feeling it explode outward like a supernova, illuminating every corner of the oppressive shadows. The night erupted in brightness, causing the dark figures to dissolve into wisps of sorrow. Their cries morphed into echoes that faded into the breeze like distant thunder. For a moment, everything fell silent as the last of their forms disintegrated. I stood trembling amid the brilliance, my heart racing, the air now tinged with a lingering warmth. But even in that moment of triumph, I couldn't shake off the looming doubt. But is it enough? I whispered, catching my breath as I searched the dark woods for signs of reprisal. The oppressive silence weighed heavily on me, as if the shadows were only biding their time. Don't lose hope, the elderly man said, placing his hand on my shoulder again. You've shown immense strength, but we need to remain vigilant. As if on cue, a faint rustle echoed through the trees once more. A creeping sensation slithered up my spine, and my heart raced as I turned toward the sound. The wind picked up, whispering warnings that flowed through the branches, straining against the calm that had settled. Suddenly, a piercing scream erupted from the depths of the darkness, chilling my bones. You cannot deny us. We will rise again. The voice echoed, swirling around us like a dreadful fog. They're still here, I stammered, my throat going dry as terror clawed back into my chest. Yes, the man acknowledged grimly, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the shadowy depths. They lie in wait. Every shadow needs a host to thrive. Now that they know your strength, they'll come back for you. The weight of his words sank into my mind like poison. What do we do? I asked, fear rising once more. Prepare your heart, he replied, edging toward the shadows that gathered. And never forget the light you carry. It will be your only protector. With those words ringing in my ears, I stood rooted in place as the darkness loomed. The chilling whispers swelled, curling around me like smoke, swirling into forms that seemed to reach for my very soul. Straining to keep my focus, I gathered the light, calling on all the hope I could muster. Step back, I shouted as shadows began encroaching again, ugly faces twisting in malicious hunger. Embrace the darkness, they hissed, their voices echoing with mockery. Join us in eternal despair. But I couldn't let myself give in to their poisonous words. I summoned every memory, every flicker of joy, every radiant moment I had experienced. The light exploded from within me like a beacon, illuminating the area in a fierce glow, pushing back against the darkness once more. Don't be afraid, I yelled with all my might, feeling the warmth surge through me as I faced the encroaching shadows. You have no power here. The light expanded all around, illuminating every inch of the clearing, sparking a surge of energy so powerful it sent the shadows staggering back. For a moment, I could see the trapped souls, faces I recognized among them, pleading for freedom as they writhed against the overwhelming light. You think you can trap us in this endless cycle? The lingering voice barked, its words dripping with venom. We are eternal. No, you're wrong, I shouted back, a surge of defiance rising within me. You could be free. Every heart in the shadows responded, flickering visibly, and for a moment, I felt a thread of hope weaving through their suffering. Will you let go of your pain? I asked them, desperation coating my words. And then, with shocking clarity, I thought I saw the sadness reflected back from some of their faces. They hesitated, uncertainty flickering behind their malevolent eyes. Yes, one cried, a pleading note rising from within. Help us. We want to escape. Then let the light in, I urged, pouring every ounce of strength into the glow at the center of my chest, urging it to grow bright enough to envelop all those trapped souls. Release your fears. We can break this cycle together. As I extended my hands into the dark mass, light pulsed from my fingertips, flowing toward each shadow as they slowly started to lose their angry countenance. I watched, heart racing, as some began to shift, to take a step toward the light. Embrace it, I pleaded, voice echoing with determination. Together, we can find peace. The shadows convulsed, the angry faces twisted with confusion. But slowly, one by one, they edged forward, drawn to the warmth and comfort I offered. I could feel the tension in the air begin to dissipate, replaced with a flickering sense of hope. Then a howl tore through the night, shattering the fragile calm. Fool! The shadowy figure thundered, rage boiling up once more. You cannot save them. They will consume you instead. The shadows screeched in response, as if drawn by the very sound of anger rising within the dark. I could feel their collective fear and pain surging back, threatening to drown out the light I fought so hard to maintain. "This isn't over," one hissed, darting forward with a swift movement, trying to pull me back into the pit of despair. But I stood firm, gripping the warmth of hope tighter, channeling every ounce of love I could muster. "I won't let you take me back," I shouted, pushing back against the shadows closing in around me. Suddenly, the elderly man's voice broke through the chaos. "Remember, light cannot exist without darkness, but we can choose to embrace it." His words sparked a fire in my heart as I faced the shadows, gathering my thoughts. "You may try to consume me," I declared, "but I carry the warmth of love and hope within me. That is our true strength." Their furious howls mixed with desperate whispers, echoing through the clearing as the light began to pulse more strongly, spreading warmth and calm. And when I looked again, I saw not just anger and pain in their faces, but the flickers of longing mixed with fear. "Seek the light," I yelled, reaching for them with extended hands. "You can find peace. You don't have to fight anymore." The shadows hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing their twisted features. The light surrounding me continued to swell, illuminating the darkness, exposing the pain that bound them. "Let go of your chains. Come into the light." Slowly, it seemed a few shadows began to shift toward me, their forms morphing from rage to hesitant curiosity. "Will it hurt?" one whispered, its voice almost fragile. "Will we truly be free?" "All you have to do is trust," I replied, my heart racing as I felt a wave of hope wash over me. "You can let go of the pain you carry." And so, with trembling hands, I reached out further as the light began to envelop them, wrapping around their ethereal forms. The warmth felt alive, a sea of solace washing over the once angry souls. For a moment, the clearing was silent, the air thick with anticipation. "What if it's a trap?" Another shadow croaked, uncertainty lacing its voice. "I promise you, there is nothing but love and light," I said earnestly, wishing I could show them the truth that burned in my heart. "No more pain, just peace." The faces looked back at me, contorted with anguish, but also glimmering with the faintest hint of hope. As the energy surged around us, I felt the bond between us strengthening, and I held my breath, hoping it was enough for them to take that final step. Finally stepping into the light, their dark forms beginning to lose their menacing shapes. I watched, breath held tight, as the shadows shimmered and flickered, their edges softening as they reached for me. "It's working," I shouted, my voice vibrating with hope. But amid this fragile moment of victory, a low growl echoed from the treeline, slicing through the air like glass. Panic surged within me. I turned sharply, my senses alert, heart pounding. The dark figure loomed larger than before, shadows swirling like a storm around it, tendrils stretching and reaching as though alive. "You think they can be saved?" it bellowed, voice dripping with malice. "You are a fool to think light can vanquish me." The shadows paused, a flicker of doubt crossing their faces. Some still hesitated, caught between the lure of the light and the pull of the darkness that whispered sweet lies of power and revenge. "Don't listen," I yelled, feeling the presence of the dark figure grow stronger. "You can be free." But its howls mixed with the anguished cries of the restless shadows, creating a chaotic symphony of despair. "Come back to us," the dark figure commanded, its voice echoing with an unsettling familiarity. "You know your place in the darkness." It seemed to be reaching deep into their hearts, pulling at their insecurities, dredging up every ounce of fear, sadness, and longing they ever felt. One by one, I saw the shadows wavering, their forms fluctuating like smoke. They were torn. "No!" I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Don't let it win. Embrace the light." I stretched my arms outward, drawing every fluctuation of hope I could find within until I felt the warmth bubble into an all-consuming glow. The dark figure recoiled slightly, snarling with fury. "You think you're the master of light?" it bellowed, slowly advancing, shadows rippling like waves at its feet. "I will consume you all." Suddenly, an eerie wind whipped through the clearing, stirring up a chorus of ghostly whispers that sounded almost like laughter. The trees swayed ominously, the dying light casting grotesque shadows that danced around me, mocking my efforts. I could feel the weight of despair crawling back into my mind, threatening to swallow my resolve. "Look at them," the figure taunted, pointing at the shadows swaying uneasily between the light and darkness. "They belong to the shadows, just as you do." The words sank in, clawing at my confidence. I felt a fleeting moment of doubt creep over me. What if it was right? But the elderly man stood beside me, his resolve unwavering. "Remember why you fight," he urged, voice steady and strong. "You are not alone in this. You have the light." Rejuvenated by his words, I took a deep breath, focusing on the warmth swelling within me. I visualized every joyful moment, every flicker of love, and embraced it like a shield against the encroaching darkness. The shadows needed me to believe in them, and deep down, I knew I had to trust my own strength. "I won't stop," I yelled, my voice booming over the howling wind. "I can't give up on you." Suddenly, a shadow screeched from the tree line, darting through the dark like a wild beast, its eyes gleaming with fury and desperation. It lunged toward me, jaws open wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. My heart raced as instinct kicked in. I dodged just in time, feeling the rush of air as it rushed past. "No!" I cried, panic surging through me. "Come back! You don't have to fight. Fight for yourself." But the beast didn't halt. It twisted and turned, charging once more, teeth snapping dangerously close. I felt my heart pounding louder than ever, raw fear coursing through my veins as I braced myself for impact. "Stand firm," the elderly man shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Use the light. Focus." In that moment, I gathered every ounce of hope inside, calling on the radiant energy I felt growing within, pushing it outwards like a barrier. Just as the shadow lunged again, I unleashed a brilliant burst of light that enveloped us all, a tide of warmth flooding the chilling air. The beast howled, its form momentarily suspended in the glow. It seemed to freeze, caught between two worlds, its face twisting in agony as it grappled with the light that engulfed it, pulling away from me. "No!" it screamed, eyes wide, reflecting pure fear. As the glow intensified, the other shadows gathered around, drawn to the radiant force, and I felt some of them step closer, their forms shimmering as the light's warmth wrapped around them. I could see fear morphing into longing as they reached for the light, slowly drifting toward it. But the dark figure roared with anger, dark tendrils swirling around in defiance, reaching for the shadows that lingered at the edges. "You will regret this," it seethed, its voice cracking like thunder through the night. At that moment of chaos, I sensed a shift, as if the atmosphere had thickened with tension. The trees shuddered, and ominous whispers began to swirl around me, echoing the very doubts I was trying to combat. "You cannot fight your true nature," they hissed, curling through the branches, vibrating within me like a chilling song of despair. "You're weak," the shadows jeered, laughter echoing on the wind. "You will never be enough." A deep pit of despair opened up in my heart. But then, the thought of the warmth I felt, the love, the memories, the reason I started this fight, refused to let me falter. Gathering my strength, I held tight to the light, refusing to give in to the darkness. Together, I shouted, voice piercing through the suffocating whispers. "We can stand against this." But the shadows began to retreat, the dark figure pushing them back with a cruel laugh. "They will never join you, weakling." This is where the light fades. The edge of panic threatened to burst forth in my chest as I reached desperately for the shadows, praying one of them would hold on. that they would still trust me. "I believe in you," I cried out. Suddenly, another rush of darkness erupted before me, a towering silhouette emerging from the shadows, its eyes blazing with fury. "You're nothing," it spat, lunging forward, malicious intent glimmering in its gaze. "You'll be consumed by your own light, just like the rest." My heart raced as it came closer, but I stood my ground. "No, I won't be afraid," I shouted, enveloping myself in the radiant glow once more. Just then, the shadows paused, wavering at the edge of the light. "Help us," one whispered, its face contorted in sorrow. "We don't belong to the darkness." In that moment, I understood. It wasn't about me fighting the darkness alone. It was about guiding them into the light, showing them they did not have to follow the dark figure into despair any longer. Gripping that thought, I pushed the light outward again, calling to them with every ounce of love and hope packed inside me. "Come forward," I yelled, voice trembling but resolute. "You can be free. Take my hand." The shadows hesitated, fear dissipating slightly as they gazed into the glowing warmth surrounding me, exploring the feeling that bubbled up inside. I felt their uncertainty, but there was hope too. Hope that flickered like a candle in the wind. Suddenly, the dark figure screeched, rage erupting as it lashed out. "No, you will not take them. They are mine." With a torrent of energy, it unleashed a wave of darkness toward us, the shadows twisting violently, reaching for that familiar fear. "Hold on," the elderly man cried out, steadiness grounding his voice even in the storm of chaos. "Believe in yourselves. Together, you can break free." The shadows began to shift again, some breaking away from the dark figure's grasp while others fought furiously against the chains of despair. I felt their struggle, their longing echoing through my core, and I couldn't hold back the urgency in my voice. "Don't give in," I yelled, my heart racing as I kept projecting the light, ensuring it wrapped around them with warmth. "You have strength in you. You are not alone." Another rush of darkness surged forward, howling in challenge as it collided with my light. The clash sent a reverberation through the air, shaking the ground beneath us. The boundary of light flickered violently, threatening to be snuffed out. "What will you choose?" The voice of the dark figure boomed, swirling around me like fog. "Stay loyal to your fears, or embrace the light and be weak forever?" In that moment of blind panic, I stared into the encroaching shadows, searching for any sign of recognition, for any flicker of hope that still shone within them. "Together," I shouted, heart racing, drawing on the remaining warmth I had left, feeling it pulsate through my veins. "You can let go of the darkness. Fight for yourselves." The shadows began to stir, flickering uncertainly at the edges. I could feel their hesitation shift, grasping for trust as they wrestled against the dark energy that threatened to tear them apart. Then, one shadow stepped forward, face illuminated by the light. "I choose hope," it declared, a shimmering spark breaking free from its form. At that moment, the energy between us seemed to ignite. The warmth surged, and I felt the other shadows thrumming with newfound determination. "We choose hope," they echoed, voices rising, drowning out the dark figure's furious cries. "No, you will regret this," it screamed, desperation seeping into its voice as it lunged forward, shadows snapping at its heels. The pulse of light exploded once more, enveloping each shadow that had dared to embrace the light. Hope surged through me, a blinding radiance that sparked across the clearing. Together, we pushed against the dark figure, heart racing, light exploding outward until the very fabric of darkness began to unravel. With a scream that resonated through the night, the dark figure began to melt away, losing its hold over us. The shadows, no longer drawn by its anger, broke free, their forms shimmering and glowing like stars emerging from behind a stormy sky. I took a breath, heart pounding, fight coursing through me like wildfire. "This has only just begun," I whispered to myself, feeling the aftershocks ripple through the clearing. But I would stand strong. I would keep fighting, and I would light the path for others to do the same. Even as the darkness swirled around us, promising a return in disguise, I knew we had the power to shine brighter than ever before. And through the swirling mist, I heard whispers of courage, of those who had fought, of those who would join me on this daunting journey ahead. The flickers of light continued to shine through the darkness, their resonance echoing into the depths of night. The massive weight of dread still hung in the air, but I now bore the light and the courage to carry that light into the uncharted territories that waited ahead. As hope flickered like fireflies in the dark, I stood ready, heart racing, light blazing, ready for whatever awaited beyond the horizon. As the last remnants of darkness began to fade, an unsettling silence enveloped the clearing. I stood there, breathless, my heart still racing as the light pulsed around me like a heartbeat. But then I realized the shadows I had freed were nothing but memories of the past, echoes still looming in my mind. Their faces flashed before me, trapped in a cycle of anguish, and I felt an icy chill settle deep within my bones. "Something's not right," I whispered, scanning the woods, the trees now looming taller and darker than before. The faint rustle of branches began to sound like whispers, drawing closer, as if the very forest was alive and breathing heavily around us. Did we truly defeat it? I asked, uncertainty creeping into my voice. The elderly man stood at my side, his face etched with concern. "It can disguise itself, become anything. The darkness is cunning," he warned softly. Suddenly, I could hear a faint giggle, the sound echoing through the trees, chilling my very core. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, mocking me, pulling me back into the spiraling void I had just fought to escape. I could almost feel the shadows gathering again, lurking just beyond the reach of my light. "What was that?" I asked, heart pounding. "Who's there?" The giggles turned into whispers, a wild chorus of sinister laughter that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was as if something was watching me, crawling just out of sight. The shadows melted back into the forest, swirling around me, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I felt their icy fingers creeping up my spine, tightening around my resolve. "Stay close," the elderly man said, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes scanning the darkness. "We have to move. This place is not safe." I nodded, though fear clutched my heart. As we turned to leave, the laughter erupted again, louder now, echoing behind us, trailing through the trees like a sinister wind. Every step felt heavier, the air thick with a weight that pressed down on my shoulders. "We must hurry," he urged, glancing nervously over his shoulder, his grip tightening on my arm. Then I heard it, a soft thud, then another, growing louder, almost rhythmic like footsteps following us. I resisted the urge to look back, heart thundering in my chest, praying it was just my imagination running wild. But the sensation of being hunted clung to me, each heartbeat a reminder that something was not right. "Keep moving," the elderly man insisted, and I kicked into gear, forcing my legs to move faster. Yet the laughter persisted, a taunting melody against the cacophony of whispers swirling around us. As I pushed deeper into the woods, the trees twisted like gnarled fingers, their branches reaching out hungrily as if yearning to snatch me into the darkness. The light flickered around us, struggling to hold its ground against the oppressive gloom. Suddenly, a shadow leaped out from between the trees, a dark figure darting toward us with unnatural speed. I froze, terror flooding through me. "What is that?" I shouted, my voice shaky, dread curling in my stomach. The elderly man raised his arm defensively, his face a mask of determination. "We stand together," he cried, channeling the light toward the creature as it lunged at us. In a flash, the light collided with the shadow, illuminating the figure momentarily. It was a grotesque monstrosity, a twisted version of what I used to see in my nightmares. Its limbs elongated, fingers clawed and sharp, its mouth widened in a sneer that revealed rows of jagged teeth. My breath hitched as I realized those weren't just shadows. It was filled with lost souls, their faces stretched in agony, pulled into the darkness willingly. I could recognize some of them, fragmented memories flashing in my mind of past encounters, friends lost to despair. "No!" I screamed, stepping closer, unwilling to let them fall deeper. "You can come back. You're not lost." But the creatures shrieked in response, slashing at the light, trying to break through the barrier we had created. I felt the ripple of energy around me, and it began to stem, faltering under the pressure of its fury. "They won't listen," the monster hissed, its voice a chorus of torment. "They belong to me now." "Fight it," urged the elderly man, pouring his energy into the light, desperation coating his words. "You are stronger than this." But doubt flooded my mind as I steadied myself against the darkness. The weight of despair felt nearly unbearable. I could see the shadowy souls tugging at the creature, a balance of lost hope and rage battling within. And then a thought struck me. "Together, we can pull them back," I shouted, rallying my thoughts. "If we all believe we can make it, we will." I turned my gaze from the beast momentarily to the shadows struggling within. "You are not alone. Take my hand," I called out, reaching into the darkness with everything I had left. The creature roared, threatening to engulf us both, but I felt a shift. A grip of certainty was forming amidst the chaos. The lost souls hesitated once more, glancing back at me, their faces flickering with fear and hope, caught in the melody of the light. "I believe in you," I shouted, feeling the warmth swell in my chest again. And with that light surrounding me, I pushed outwards, pulling them from the grip of despair. "Let go of the pain. Come back." Their faces began to soften as they turned towards me. I could see the flicker of recognition blooming within their hollow eyes, a surrender to the warmth I was offering. The creature writhed in response, the light pushing against it, forcing it to reveal its true form, the sorrow born from 1,000 lost souls. "No," it shrieked. "You can't save them. They are mine." But I didn't let its anger deter me. I focused on the light, channeling every ounce of strength into calling that flicker of hope forward. Just then, a haunting wail rang out. The shadows began to struggle free from the creature's grasp, their faces swirling into view, glimmers of appreciation sparkling amidst the darkness. They edged closer, shimmering brighter with each step, and in a unified grunt, they took my hand. A wave of relief cascaded over me, and I could feel the power surging like a tidal wave, pushing against the darkness with newfound strength. As they joined me, the creature howled, the sound slicing through the night, reverberating with the raw anguish trapped within it. "You will regret this," it growled, as if readying itself for one final assault. The shadows surged forward, their hands gripping mine tightly, filled with determination, each echo of their past blending with my resolve. They were reclaiming their voices, their power awakened as they fought back against the darkness. "Together," I yelled, raising my hands high, a brilliant burst of light radiating outward. The creature faltered, reeling at the brightness, the despair draping around it beginning to unravel like a frayed thread. As the darkness trembled, bitter cries of anguish intertwined with whispers of longing filled the air, swirling through the night like a haunting lullaby. But the shadows were now glowing, the fusion of our essences harmonizing into an ethereal glow that surged higher and brighter. In that moment, I could feel the chains breaking, the spirits reclaiming their freedom. "You can be free," I shouted one last time, channeling every ounce of courage, every flicker of love I'd ever held dear. With a final roar, the dark figure launched forward, claws outstretched, but we stood united, the light engulfing every inch, pushing back against the darkness until it could no longer hold on. "Together," we shouted, the sound echoing through the trees, a rallying cry that pierced the night. As the creature faded into nothingness, screams of rage mingled with cries of relief, swirling like a storm through the clearing. I felt the weight around me lifting, the shadows dissolving into light, weaving together a tapestry of hope that transformed the very air we breathed. And then the clearing was still again. The shadows were gone, replaced by the beautiful glow of freedom and solace. Exhaustion settled in, and I stumbled back, bewildered as the night air wrapped around me like a soft blanket. I turned to the elderly man, a sense of disbelief painted across my features. "Is it really over?" I asked, hope rippling through my heart. But the silence that followed felt wrong. The air was still, the faint echoes of the past lingered in the distance, and an unsettling dread crept back into my veins. "We have won this battle," he replied, his eyes scanning the woods, still alert. "But darkness will always seek to return. It's not gone for good." Fear clawed at me as I realized the truth of his words. I could still sense something lurking, patiently watching from the shadows. And just as I turned to follow his gaze, a whisper floated through the air, chilling my very spirit. "You are safe for now." It leaked through the trees, soft yet sinister. "But in time, we will meet again." My breath caught in my throat as I stood frozen, an icy grip settling in my stomach. I knew the battle was far from over, and with a final glance back into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling the weight of the emptiness surrounding me. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their branches whispering secrets I couldn't understand. The words still echoed in my mind. "We will meet again." A chill crept over me. It felt like 1,000 eyes were watching, hidden behind the thick bark of the trees. I strained to listen, hoping to hear something beyond the rustle of leaves and the distant croak of frogs. But all I felt was suffocating silence, pressing in on me like a heavy fog. "Let's move," the elderly man urged, his voice breaking through my anxious thoughts. I nodded, even though fear tugged at my insides. I could still sense that something was waiting, biding its time. We pushed deeper into the woods, but every crack of a twig made me jump. Every gust of wind sent shivers down my spine. As we walked, the path seemed to twist, turning into an unfamiliar maze. The trees looked more twisted and gnarled, their branches clawing at the sky, as if to trap the light. Each shadow deepened, feeling like dark hands reaching out, ready to snatch me away. "Stay close," he repeated, his eyes scanning the darkness with a mix of fear and determination. With every step, I kept glancing back, half expecting to see a pair of glowing eyes watching us from the underbrush. Every time I turned, I felt the shadows shifting, 1,000 whispering voices echoing something I couldn't grasp. Then a sound broke through the air, a low moan, deep and echoing, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It came from ahead, like a wailing lost soul. My breath hitched as the sound grew louder, twisting around me, coiling like fog, drawing me in with a sense of dread. "What is that?" I breathed, feeling the ground beneath me tremble slightly. The elderly man frowned, pausing, and I noticed his grip tightening around the staff he held. "Something wicked," he replied, swallowing hard. "We must be careful." Against my better judgment, curiosity pulled me forward. The moans escalated, merging with the rustling leaves, creating a haunting melody that seemed to call to me. I knew I shouldn't go on, but I couldn't help myself. The darkness flooded my thoughts, and before I knew it, I was moving ahead, creeping toward the sound. The air around me thickened, heavy with an unseen presence. I turned and saw shadows flickering just beyond the trees, shapes twisting and slithering like snakes on the ground. I stopped short, feeling the pull of fear gnawing at my heart. Each flicker felt like a warning, but I ignored it. Then the sound shifted. No longer just a moan, but a whisper coiling around me. "Come closer," it hissed, soft and silky, like a lover's promise. I felt my heart race, and my feet moved in spite of myself. The elderly man shouted behind me, but the whispers drowned him out, wrapping tighter around me. Suddenly, the ground bucked beneath my feet. I stumbled, losing my balance just as the trees groaned. Leaning in closer, intent on closing in around me, I fell to the ground, and the whispers turned chaotic, blending into frantic screams, shrill and desperate. "Help me! Please!" they cried. "Free us!" Terror seized my chest. I looked around frantically. Shadows whirled, taking the shapes of twisted faces, mouths open in eternal screams. Their hollow eyes locked onto mine, pleading, consumed by a darkness I couldn't understand. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, desperate to escape the pull of their anguish. "We can't help you," I shouted back, fear bubbling in my throat. The old man reached toward me, his voice hoarse with urgency. "Run," he yelled, but I couldn't move. The trees leaned closer, their branches curling like fingers around my body, and I felt the fog of despair wrap around my shape-shifting companions. Just then, a flicker of light caught my eye from between the shadows. I turned to see a figure slip between the trees, a familiar face twisted in agony, half-formed, as if trapped between worlds. It was one of the souls from before, yearning for release, but ensnared by the grip of dark shadows. I gasped, "No, I know you." But the shadow dove back into the darkness, its scream echoing like a wail of forgotten memories. The shadows shifted again, responding to my cry, and I felt my fear transform into a desperate resolve. "I won't let you take them," I shouted, summoning my strength. The light around me flared, but it was weak, flickering like a candle in the night. "Together," I cried out again, hoping to invoke the bond one felt before. But the shadows loomed, expecting my failure, leering with jagged smiles that whispered promises of despair. "You cannot fight what you truly fear," they taunted, their voices gliding through the air, cold and sharp. "Believe," the elderly man shouted, and the urgency in his voice spurred me onward. I could feel his strength fading, the weight of the darkness pressing heavily against him. Just as I began to retreat, the moaning crescendoed into anguished cries. A flood of lost souls swarmed around me, swirling like a tempest. They grasped at me, their icy fingers tugging, pulling me apart, stripping the resolve I had built. Amid the chaos, I felt the shadows surge, swirling angrily as if sensing their hold beginning to slip. "You will join us," they screeched, dark tendrils shooting towards me, ready to consume my very essence. In a split second, time froze. Everything felt suspended as I inhaled sharply, the darkness threatening to close around me. But then, a surge of warmth blossomed within my chest. Memories flashed by, filled with hope and happiness, illuminating every dark corner that threatened to consume me. "Stay back!" I yelled, flinging my arms out as the light around me pulsed higher, fueled by the memories. The darkness wailed, shadows retreating just enough for me to breathe, to feel the light surge through me like an electric current. I held on to that warmth. I envisioned the faces of those I cherished, the laughter of friends, the joy of family gatherings, and all the moments that filled me with light. "You can't take these memories," I roared, channeling that feeling into an explosive wave of radiance. The shadows recoiled, screeching in pain as the light erupted around me like fireworks. I pushed further, feeding off that overwhelming energy, ready to break free. "Together!" I cried one more time, letting the light flow from me, weaving together with the memories of the lost souls. As the radiance swirled and surged, I reached toward the shadows, hoping to reclaim what was taken. I could feel the souls fighting to break free from their chains, their moans transforming into shouts of determination as they rose above despair. Then something caught my eye again, a deeper shadow, darker than the rest, slipping silently between the trees. It slid past the radiant light, finding a way forward, its shape lingering just beyond my reach. My heart sank as the darkness seeped into everything, threatening to consume the victory we'd just fought for. With every ounce of strength, I pulled at the warmth within me, channeling it toward the figure slipping away. "Face us!" I shouted, commanding the darkness to reveal itself. But it only laughed, a chilling sound that rattled my bones. The air grew thick, and the whispers filled with malignant glee as they swirled around us. "You think you can save them?" the shadows taunted. "You think you are strong enough?" Weakness invites darkness. The weight of their words pressed down, gnawing at my heart, but in that moment, I felt a flicker of defiance igniting. "I will not give in," I roared, breath coming in ragged gasps. The elder man stepped beside me, proud and unwavering, even as the tendrils of despair threatened to ensnare him once more. "Even in the darkest of night, a single flame can guide the lost," he declared, grounding me, his voice now a steady anchor in the storm. With renewed strength, I focused on the light that had ignited within me, allowing it to pull the lost souls forward. The darkness writhed, twisting around us, but I could feel the warmth of hope transforming fear as the radiant glow expanded, coursing through every lost memory trapped in the shadows. The black figure surged closer, a mass of swirling despair. "You cannot hold onto the light," it howled, as the darkness broke into a menacing grin. "You will all fade together." But the light cracked through the shadows and swallowed the darkness, refusing to bend, refusing to break. The battle was still raging as I clung to that flicker of hope, keeping the fire burning bright against the swelling tide of despair. And as the figures of lost souls rallied around me, I felt the chains of darkness begin to shatter one by one, the echoes of their cries melding with the surge of light, blazing through the night, as if to dispel the lingering chill of the malignant force trying to reclaim them. With one burst, I unleashed myself, letting the light erupt outward in every direction, a final stand against fear and despair. It roared in anger, but I felt the connection grow stronger, an unbreakable bond forged through the fire of our shared struggles. The shadows howled, the darkness unwilling to yield, but I could see its power waning, cracking under the weight of our resolve. "We will fight," I shouted, the words rising above the screams, my voice echoing through the trees, distilling every ounce of hope. The darkness clawed back. I could feel it scraping against me, but I anchored myself to the glow of memories, to the faces of those I loved. Slowly, I pulled my hands back, scraping together all that was left before me. A single bright flash erupted, illuminating the trees, casting off shadows like broken glass. Before my eyes, the dark figure shattered, scattering into millions of pieces that dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind an echo of despair fading into the night. But as the darkness lifted, doubt slithered back into my mind. Something deeper still lingered in the shadows, something that wanted to come back. That feeling lingered like a bad dream, an unwanted guest that wouldn't go away. The air crackled with tension, and I was frozen, standing amid the remnants of what we had just fought. I could still hear the sighing of the trees, the chirping crickets that seemed to mock the silence left behind. I turned slowly, scanning the darkened forest around me for any sign of what had been vanquished. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, teasing me with glimpses of movement I couldn't fully comprehend. Each flicker pulled me deeper into uncertainty and dread. The comforting glow we had generated flickered weakly, as if it too was afraid to fully reach the gloom that engulfed us. "Are you all right?" the elderly man asked, his voice breaking through the haze of fear. He looked worried, glancing into the darkness as though sensing something I couldn't see. I nodded slowly, though doubt gnawed at me. "I don't feel safe," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not over, is it?" "No," he replied, his brow furrowing deeply. "The darkness will always find a way to return. We must be on our guard." As we continued along the twisting path, every sound sent jolts of terror down my spine. The rustling leaves felt like fingers brushing against my skin, a constant reminder of the shadows lurking just out of sight. I could almost hear their whispers again, soft, mocking, slithering into my ears, wrapping themselves around my thoughts. Then I noticed something strange, movement in the underbrush. I paused, squinting into the blackness just beyond the trees. Something was moving, creeping closer, its shape rippling like smoke. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up as it slithered into the dim light. From the shadows emerged a not-quite-human figure, its skin pale and stretched tight over bony limbs. Its observant eyes, sunken deep and filled with an unnatural glow, locked onto mine. It held itself hunched low, a grotesque mimicry of a creature made of shadows, each move fluid yet unsettling, as though it danced just on the edge of reality. "Help us," it rasped, the voice a distorted echo of the cries from before, slithering like a serpent around every word. "We are lost, you can save us." I felt a chill sweep through me, and I instinctively took a step back. "What do you want?" I stammered, each word catching in my throat. The figure tilted its head, a sickening grin cracking across its face, a laugh devoid of any warmth, just pure malice. "Want?" it hissed. "We want everything you hold dear. We want your light, your warmth. We are the shadows that thrive on despair, and we will take what is yours." A pang of fear gripped my heart, and as I glanced at the elder, I saw his face pale. "It's a trick," he warned, his voice low but steady. "Don't listen to it." But the figure only laughed louder, a cacophony of whispers rising around us like a swarm of angry bees. "You think you won? We are greater in number. Your light cannot defeat us all." Suddenly, dozens of shadowy forms began to emerge from the darkness, slipping through the trees like smoke in the wind. They moved in unison, circling us, their whispers growing more chaotic, louder and more frantic until they drowned out all rational thought. I clutched the old man's arm. "What do we do?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. The figures swirled closer, their hungry eyes sparkling darkly with mischievous malice. My heart raced, and I could see no way out. "Focus on the light," he urged, pulling me closer. "Remember what we have fought for. Use it against them." In that moment, I realized what he meant. It was time to reclaim what I had gained. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, recalling the warmth of love, joy, and the faces of those who mattered to me. As the energy swelled within me, the shadows recoiled slightly, their whispers turning to hisses. But fear still squeezed my heart. What if it's not enough? I wondered silently, doubts gnawing at my mind. As if sensing my weakness, the figure in the front tilted its head again, a sharper grin spreading across its face. "Oh, but it will never be enough," it taunted, inching closer, eyes glimmering with hunger. "Look around you. You are surrounded." I opened my eyes, and in horror, I saw the figures closing in. They had formed a tight circle, a castle of shadows trapping us within it. The filthy whispers crescendoed into a chant, a sound that gnawed at my sanity, promising doom with each fleeting syllable. "Let us in," they sang like a twisted lullaby. "Join us. You will be ours. Fight," the old man shouted, thrusting his staff into the air, urging me forward. "Do not let them take you." His voice was fierce, but I felt brittle. The shadows pressed around me, suffocating and determined to crush any flicker of defiance. Taking a shaky breath, I reached deep inside, letting the light roar to life. The glow pulsed in my chest, a warm beacon amidst the consuming darkness. I thrust my hands forward, channeling every positive emotion, every memory of warmth and strength. The sooner I faced the shadows, the faster the fear could give way to light. The shadows shrieked in unison, their forms rippling like water disturbed. "You think your light will save you?" one of them sneered, venom dripping from its words. I could feel the courage build, but self-doubt crept back in, threatening to extinguish the fire I'd kindled. I dropped my head, fighting back tears that burned my eyes. What if they were right? What if my light was never enough? But something deep inside me whispered, "You are not alone." With renewed fury, I lifted my gaze, locking eyes with that first twisted figure. "Together!" I cried, voice shaking but resolute. With a challenging shout, I poured all I had into the radiant light erupting from me. A shockwave surged outwards, crashing against the shadows with a blinding flash. The golden flare seared through the darkness, illuminating the forest like dawn breaking over midnight. The shadows writhed, caught off guard, losing their grip as the pure energy consumed the fear and doubt. Suddenly, the weight lifted. The world shifted back into focus. I could see it, light bursting forth once more, scattering the lingering shadows like broken glass. My heart raced, beating in sync with the explosive surge of power that radiated from my core. But even as the shadows wailed, retreating momentarily from the light, I felt that something deeper still lingered. The echoes of whispering threats filled the air, swirling just outside of my grasp, warning me that this battle was only the beginning. I glanced at the elderly man, searching for reassurance, but his eyes widened in dread. "We must keep moving," he urged, voice laced with urgency. "We cannot let them regroup." As I turned again to face the path ahead, I couldn't shake the feeling that something waited just beyond our light, scheming and plotting for our next move. My heart raced, filled with an unsettling calm, as though we were running toward a storm rather than away from it. The wind whispered ominously through the trees, and the hollow moon hung low above, casting eerie shadows around us, making the darkness feel even deeper and more foreboding. Each step forward felt like stepping into a trap carefully woven by the darkness, though I held on tightly to the glow within me, determined to move bravely onward. I could sense the shift in the air. It thickened, heavy with anticipation, as if something ancient and malevolent was stirring. The shadows flickered and faded in the corners of my vision, and despite the light shining around us, I could feel the tendrils of fear wrapping tighter around my heart, promising pain and suffering yet to come. Each heartbeat was a countdown, and I knew we hadn't truly escaped. The thought sent a jolt of cold fear racing up my spine, but I pushed it aside as we forged ahead, deeper into the shadows that loomed ahead. I pushed deeper into the dark woods, the shadows swirling around me like an unseen fog. Each step felt like a trap, pulling me closer to something I couldn't quite see but could definitely feel. The air turned heavy, almost thick, and it was harder to breathe. I pulled my jacket tighter around me as a chill seeped into my bones. The old man walked beside me, his presence steady yet strained, like a frail tree bending against a storm. I could hear his breath, each gasping inhale blending into the silence that screamed all around us. Then I heard it. A low hum resonated in the air, an unsettling melody that drifted through the trees. It was a sweet sound with an eerie edge, wrapping around my mind like fog, drawing me in. My heart quickened, my instincts shouting for me to run, but I found I couldn't. It was as if the melody gripped my very soul, inviting me to dance among the shadows. "What is that?" I gasped, looking at the old man, his brow furrowed, eyes darting around nervously. "Don't listen to it," he warned, his voice low and tense. "That sound will lure you deeper into the darkness. We must keep moving." But part of me was captivated by the tune, like a moth to a flame. I took a step forward, almost against my will. The trees shifted around us, their branches bending, as if trying to reach for something buried within the depths of the forest. Fear gripped me, tightening its noose, yet the melody called to me, sweet and addictive. Suddenly, the old man grabbed my arm, startling me from my trance. "Don't let it take you," he shouted, his eyes wide with urgency. I felt the warmth of his grip break through the fog wrapping around my mind, and I nodded, though my heart raced in confusion. Just then, the ground trembled beneath us, as if the very earth was alive and aware. Twisting roots began to emerge from the soil, creeping along the path like long, skeletal fingers reaching to pull us down. I stumbled back, instinctively clutching the old man's hand as he swung his staff to fend them off, sending a bright flash that disrupted the dance of shadows lingering on the ground. But the shadows surged back, angry and insistent. They morphed, elongating and stretching, becoming more defined as their twisted forms beckoned us closer. "You can't escape," they hissed in perfect harmony. "Join us. Feel the music." The melody rose in pitch, a haunting chorus echoing the shadow's call, wrapping around my mind like a chain. I felt something stir within me, battling against my will, urging me to let go and surrender to the darkness. I fought against it, desperately clinging to the warmth of the old man's hand. We pushed forward, the shadows snapping at our heels, the roots snapping at our feet, fighting against the darkness tightening around us. Every step felt treacherous, the laughter of the shadows chasing us, melting into sinister whispers that chilled my bones. "We have to make it to the clearing," the old man urged, eyes scanning the dense trees. "That's where the light is strongest. We can't let them pin us in." Determined, I focused on my surroundings, searching for a hint of escape. But the trees seemed to shift, creating an endless labyrinth that twisted and turned, leading us deeper into a haunting embrace. Fear gnawed at me, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last. Then I saw it, a flicker of light up ahead, shining through the dark foliage. I felt a rush of hope, pushing me forward in desperation. "Look!" I shouted, half crying in relief. But as we approached, the shadows thickened, swirling around the light like a protective shroud. The temperature dropped sharply, frost coating the air as we neared the flicker. "Stay close," the old man cautioned, tightening his grip on his staff as if it would protect us from the wrath of the advancing gloom. But as we stepped closer to the light, I felt my resolve fading. The shadows darted around, whispering darker truths that seeped into my mind. "You cannot escape your fate," they crooned. "You belong to us." Just as I noticed cracks forming in the light, a deep growl echoed from the very heart of the darkness, shaking the ground beneath my feet. The shadows parted with a shudder, revealing a dim, gnarled figure. It was larger than the others, dripping with shadows that writhed and twisted like smoke. Its eyes burned a deep crimson, the light reflecting off it like embers in a dying fire. "You think you are brave?" it thundered, voice rumbling like thunder through the trees. "You cannot fight fate. You can only delay it." The ground quaked, and I stumbled back, fear rooting me in place. I felt the old man's hand tighten around mine, his body tense as he prepared to defend us. I could see the waves of despair rolling off the figure, creeping back toward us in an attempt to suffocate the light. "The clearing is close," he urged, and a surge of courage pulled me from the depths of my fear. I looked at the growing light ahead, fighting back against the despair climbing up my throat. "Together," I said, feeling strength seep back into my bones. "We have to reach it." With that, we charged toward the flickering glow, the shadows howling in rage, vibrations reverberating throughout the forest like angry drums. They twisted and swarmed, trying to drag us back into their maw of despair. But with every step, I felt my defiance ignite. A burst of energy surged through me as I focused on the light, pouring everything I had into each step. "You won't win," I shouted, the words echoing through the darkened space. The shadows flickered around us, glaring with a furious intensity, snapping like vines desperate to snag their prey. As we reached the light, it flared up, rich and warm, cascading like a waterfall down the edges of the clearing. I could feel its brightness wrap around us like a protective blanket, pushing back against the shadows' grasp. But the shadows were relentless. They swirled and converged at the edge of the clearing, their forms morphing into a single entity, one that exuded darkness and rage, an abomination of shadows that screamed for vengeance. "You will regret this," it hissed, each syllable freezing the air around me, chilling my bones like ice. "You think you can defy us? You have merely uncovered the darkness that dwells within you." I felt a surge of despair wash over me, seeping into my heart as the figure lunged forward, its clawed hands reaching out, sharp enough to rend flesh from bone. Panic surged, but the light pulsed stronger, brighter, illuminating every dark thought that threatened to swallow me whole. "Now," the old man shouted, and together we raised our hands, filling the air with light gathered from our shared memories. The brightness exploded outward, sending tendrils of warmth spiraling through the shadows, igniting a radiant barrier between us and that creeping darkness. The malevolence howled, a guttural sound that shook the very ground and echoed through the branches. It flailed, shadows twisting violently around, but the light surged forward, shattering the shade like glass. But in that moment of triumph, the light flickered, its glow teetering as if uncertain. I could feel the shadows pushing against the barrier, testing it, trying to break free. I thought I could see the darkness retreat, but it reassured itself, coiling tightly, ready for another strike. "Keep the light strong," the man yelled, eyes narrowed in concentration. I focused, digging deep, pulling memories of love and joy from the corners of my heart, letting them fuel my determination. Yet something in the shadows began to shift. More figures appeared behind the main entity, vast and monstrous, their eyes glistening with malice, whispering darker secrets of fear and despair. I could hear them urging me to give in, promising me ease if I only let go. I shivered, clenching my fist tighter, breathing heavily as I faced the cold uncertainty of my fate. "We are strong," I whispered fiercely to myself, but doubt crept back, pooling in my gut like poison. Then came a flash, bright and blinding, stronger and more radiant than anything I had ever felt. I gasped as a wave of warmth washed over me. The shadows recoiled, and their angry whispers turned to confused yelps, retreating like a foamy tide beneath a shimmering beacon of hope. Gripping my hand tighter, the old man beamed at me. "You're doing it. Keep the fire alive." Suddenly, one of the figures lunged forward, its breath a tainted mist curling around my senses. I swallowed hard, feeling its darkness encroaching, ready to envelop me in its despair. Yet the light flared again, pulsing defiantly, pushing back the growing fog. I could see the fear in the eyes of the shadows as the brightness pushed deep into their territory. I felt the words spilling from my lips, stronger, fiercer, each shout carrying with it my determination, refusing to give in. "Go away!" I screamed, pouring everything I had into those words. But as I looked around, I noticed more shadows creeping in behind the main figure. More forms, darkened figures of twisted faces and hollow eyes staring back at me. They moved closer, whispering promises, chilling my spine with their words. "You cannot fight what you are. You belong to the darkness." As their eerie laughter crescendoed, I felt the grip of reality slipping away. The space around us warped, distorted visions of my greatest fears and memories flooded my mind. I was thrust into a pit of my own despair, shadows closing in, silhouettes of regret and guilt suffocating my heart. "Hold tight," the old man shouted, empathizing with my struggle as he safeguarded the light. But I felt myself wavering, edges blurring as everything around me morphed into chaos. I fought against it, forcing myself to focus, drawing the memories back into the front of my mind. The warm laughter of friends, the radiant smiles of family, any image that represented light. But the shadows twisted deeper, the air growing murky and cold, and the power of the darkness threatened to envelop me whole. I gasped for breath, pulling myself back to the present as the shadows swirled and danced, eager to consume yet another lost soul. My heart raced, caught in a chaotic storm of emotions, each thought colliding violently. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt everything start to slip away. Yet in the depths of all that consuming darkness, a tiny spark flickered. It reminded me that I was not alone. I glanced at the old man, still standing strong, and in that moment, I felt a rush of determination bloom within me. Resolutely, I pushed the fear back down, standing firm against the shadows. I drew in a deep breath, holding onto the flicker of light that refused to fade. "Together!" I shouted again, allowing the warmth to surge through me. That spark ignited into an inferno, bursting forth in a brilliant flash as I called on the memories deeper than fear, picturing the faces of those I loved. The light surged outward, pushing back against the shadows with an intensity that shook the very ground. "No!" the main figure roared, its voice a cacophony of rage and despair, flailing backward as the light surged on every side. You cannot be this strong. But I knew I could, and I was ready to prove it. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead. As the shadows screeched, helpless against the power of my light, they twisted into shapes of pure rage, desperately trying to regain their footing. Yet I stood firm, drawing every ounce of courage inside me. "You will not win," I shouted, and with that, I channeled every bit of my strength into the brilliance exploding from me. I released the energy with everything I had, and the light burst forth like a supernova, bright and fierce. For a moment, I felt invincible as it pushed out, a wall of brilliance against the consuming darkness trying to swallow me whole. The shadows convulsed, hissing angrily, their forms warping and flickering at the edges. They twisted into grotesque shapes, clawing desperately at the radiant force I created. I could see their faces now, twisted in agony, reflecting every dark thought they had ever whispered. "Foolish child," the main figure roared, voice echoing in a deep, rumbling growl. "You think you're stronger than us? We are a part of you." Its words slithered into my mind, probing old fears and regrets. I could hear echoes of laughter from distant memories, mocking me, weighing down my heart. The shadows seemed to pull closer, their figures merging into a swirling abyss, weaving itself back together like a living thing, intent on breaking the light that fought against them. Dread washed over me, a wave so powerful it felt like being pulled underwater. They reached into the depths of my mind, pulling out fragments of insecurity and despair, whispering truths that had once haunted me. "You will never be free," they hissed, voices intertwining like a chorus of lost souls. "Embrace who you are." But I dug my heels into the ground, steeling myself against their onslaught. "No!" I shouted, feeling the light pulse stronger within me. Images of my loved ones pressed against my heart, pushing back the darkness, creeping near. If they wanted me to doubt myself, they would have to try harder. The old man raised his staff, channeling his energy into the fight. "Hold your ground," he yelled, urging me to keep my focus. With a final surge, I let the memories consume me, feeding the light with everything I had. The warmth flickered at my fingertips, spreading outward, battling the cold grasp of darkness that sought to crawl back into my heart. "Together," I shouted again, and with those words, the light flared up once more, filling the space with an intensity that felt electric. But the main figure twisted back, its rage mounting as the shadows behind it thickened, expanding and crashing forward like a tide. I felt terror graze my cheek as some of the tendrils slithered near, relentless, eager to invade my thoughts and drown out my courage with fear. A chilling wind swept through the clearing, tossing scattered leaves around me like angry spirits. The trees creaked ominously overhead, their branches curling like claws reaching for me, hungry and alive. "Look around you," the shadows urged. "You're trapped in a nightmare, a cycle you cannot break." My heartbeat quickened, and the shadows pushed against my consciousness, swirling in thick waves of darkness that made it hard to breathe. I started to feel the weight of exhaustion, the urge to let go creeping in, whispering promises of comfort and surrender. "No!" I shouted again, forcing the words past my lips. "I am not giving in." With great effort, I drew strength from the warmth around me, the light illuminating the thick mist of darkness closing in. It felt like running against a storm, but deep down, I knew I couldn't buckle. I took a step forward, defiance coursing through my veins. "I refuse to become a part of you," I screamed. The light pulsed, shaking the shadows hard, making them stagger back momentarily. In that brief moment of retreat, I glimpsed silhouettes of those I loved woven into the dark fabric of the shadows, their faces twisted and gnarled with anguish. My heart sank, the sight wrenching pain through my chest. "Stop!" I cried, rage mixing with fear. "You will not use them against me." Fury ignited deep within, and I concentrated on the light, my resolve hardening. "You are nothing but a facade." The shadows let out a wail, their forms distorting like shadows on a flickering screen. They surged with malice, clump and thrash as one, pouring forward in a wave that engulfed everything in its path, circling like predatory creatures ready to pounce. Feel our pain, they thundered, and I felt my senses reel, grappling with their powerful presence. I could hear pain-filled cries and sorrowful secrets echoing from their depths, each note clawing at my sanity. "Do not show them weakness," the old man commanded, his grip firm and steady, standing resolute against the turbulent shadows. "Your light is your shield." Gathering every ounce of strength, I fortified my resolve, pouring all my love and courage into the light. I focused on the memories that brought me joy, the laughter of friends and family, every hug and moment that warmed my heart. I imagined their smiles brightening my darkest days, letting that warmth fill me anew. Together, I shouted for the last time. The light exploded outward, shimmering against the advancing tide of shadows. All at once, the shadows froze, flickering with uncertainty as the blinding light pushed against their forms. I felt an energy surge through me, igniting every sinew as I held onto the brilliance. The darkness howled, fury boiling over, and I sensed it was starting to panic, desperate to reclaim its hold. But I knew this was my moment. I took a breath and gathered all my memories, let them surge forward, letting my heart cry out to the universe. "You cannot have me," I roared, and the light burst forth, a wave of fury and defiance pushing at the fabric of night. In a blinding flash, I saw the shadows caught in a tempest of brilliance, shrieking as they began to unravel. It was a sight that filled me with both fear and fierce determination. But even as their forms twisted and faded, I could feel their whispers still lingering in the air. "We will return," they echoed, their voices distorting into one final roar. "You cannot escape us forever." The breeze picked up again, swiping through the clearing as the light blazed around me, illuminating every dark corner where they had once lurked. I felt their presence shrink and pull back, a hint of victory igniting a fire of hope in my chest. But just as I thought I had won, the shadows surged again. They reformed, creeping around the edges of the clearing like a pestilent fog. Their chorus was relentless, growing louder, desperate to drown out my light. "You cannot silence us," they cried. Panic washed over me as I realized I couldn't drop my guard yet. The light flickered. I turned toward the old man, desperation brimming in my voice. "What do I do now?" "Stay strong," he said, the weight of worry in his eyes. "Don't let them take this moment from you." Nodding fervently, I breathed deeply, feeling warmth radiate from the center of my soul, and clung tightly to this moment, determined to hold onto the light. I could still hear the creeping whispers slithering around the edges, reminding me of all I had ever feared, but I would not back down. Steeling myself, I stepped forward, focused on the source of the flickering glow ahead. It seemed to pulse as if it were alive, and I drew closer, feeling the heat warm my skin. The shadows hissed and snapped around me, reaching out, but each time they came near, the light flared brighter, pushing them back. I had to believe in the strength of my heart. I kept repeating that to myself, and as I pressed further, I could see an outline forming beyond the shadows. Something glimmered beyond the darkness, a promise of hope calling to me. I reached for it, feeling the pull stronger than gravity itself. Just before the shadows could snatch me back, I grasped the glowing orb, holding it tightly. Suddenly, it burst into a brilliant shower of light, cascading around me like a wave, washing over the shadows and illuminating everything. The air crackled, and for a moment, the world spun into colors I had never seen before. The shadows writhed, shrieking as they melted away like wax under a flame. I could feel their cold tendrils retreating, a sensation unlike anything I'd ever felt before, like coming out from underwater into the warm sun. But just as the cheers of victory filled my heart, I saw something dark flicker back at the edges of the light. The main figure. It lingered, staring back at me with piercing crimson eyes full of malevolence. A single heartbeat passed before it hissed. You cannot escape the darkness within. With that, it lunged forward, its terrifying figure breaking through the residual glow, claws aiming right for me. "No!" I cried out, feeling the chill rush through my veins as the last remnants of the shadows clawed back within reach. But just as fury began to claw back into fear, I held the light tightly, feeling its warmth pulse at my fingertips. Instinctively, I raised my hand as the figure rushed toward me, aiming to engulf me in shadow. "Your words have no power here," I yelled, and with that, I thrust the light forward as though it were a blade, piercing through the darkness. The air crackled, and in an instant, the shadows screamed, shattering with the explosion of radiant energy. The light surged, obliterating all in its path, burning away the encroaching darkness until the forest stood illuminated, stark and silent. I gasped, the tension releasing, and the shadows evaporated into wisps, leaving nothing but whispers of despair echoing behind them. The darkness shrank back, trembling at the reach of the light. But deep down, I knew they were not finished. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy like a fog rolling in, ready to suffocate any warmth left behind from the battle. The shadows hadn't just disappeared. They lingered just beyond the edge of my vision, their whispers still curling around me like smoke, promising that this wasn't the end. The old man stood beside me, his eyes scanning the tree-line, alert. "They're gathering," he said, voice low, barely above a whisper. I followed his gaze, heart pounding, trying to catch any movement in the dim light of the clearing. Nothing should be lurking here. Nothing but the aftermath of our fight. Yet a dreadful chill settled in my bones, and every rustle of leaves felt like a warning. Suddenly, the ground beneath my feet rumbled, sending tremors up my legs. I stumbled back, eyes wide as I centered my focus on the earth cracking. From the fissures emerged shadows, thin and wiry, clawing their way out of the dark soil like desperate vines reaching for the sunlight. Each inch they moved sent adrenaline scurrying through my body, and I felt fear gripping my throat. "Look!" I shouted, pointing as the shadows grew larger and more defined, pooling into dark blobs, forming menacing shapes. The old man lifted his staff, ready to summon whatever last bit of magic he had. "Hold your ground," he commanded, his voice steady but strained. I braced myself, clenching my fists, feeling my heart thump wildly. The vibrations from the earth shook harder, a deep growl echoing from below, resonating through my chest. It didn't sound like a mere whisper this time. It was a roar, an angry chorus of the shadows swarming together, hungry to reclaim the territory they'd lost. With each second, the shadows morphed, a writhing mass of darkness creeping closer, eager to snuff out the light we had forged. I felt the air grow colder, my breath coming out in frosty puffs. I could hear the piercing wails of lost souls, their cries mingling with my own heartbeat. "They want to take you with them," I thought, my stomach twisting with dread. As the shadows advanced, they knotted together, moving like a swarm of locusts, evoking a suffocating sense of hopelessness. The dark energy crackled with malice, and I could see gnarled faces shift in and out, eyes glimmering like coals in the dim haze. They seemed to reach out to me, claw-like fingers stretching, trying to pull me into their abyss. "No!" I yelled, flinging my hands toward the oncoming tide of darkness. "You can't have me!" My courage burned bright, but the shadows coiled closer, beckoning, urging me to surrender, to give in to despair. "Remember," the old man's voice cut through the darkness, his eyes blazing with determination. "The light is your only defense." In that moment, everything fell silent, the cacophony of shadows waiting, watching me. I took a deep breath, letting the warmth spread from my heart to my fingertips. I summoned every memory of joy I could think of. I imagined sunny days filled with laughter, the feeling of loved ones holding me tight, every cherished moment that pushed back against the blackness trying to consume me. The shadows surged forward, but I poured my emotions into the air around me. the light flaring bright like the dawn after a long night. It surged outwards, brightening the clearing as the shadows shrieked in fury, twisting and shrinking from the onslaught. I felt powerful, alive, as the radiance flared higher, illuminating every corner of the dark, and the shadows began to recoil, screeching in pain. But just as quickly, a coldness enveloped me, creeping in like a whisper at the back of my mind. "You're weak," it hissed. "They will return. They always return." I shuddered, throwing off the disquieting thought. I steadied myself, refusing to let the darkness seep into my heart. This was my moment, and I wouldn't let them take it from me. With every inch of strength I had, I pushed the light outward, dancing around the shadows, pushing them back deeper into the depths of the forest. Yet I could feel them yearning, gathering like a storm, their shapes flickering, flashes of hands clawing at the brightness, their faces twisted with rage. "You will give in," they howled, a chorus of despair that rattled my bones and brought echoes of fear creeping back. I felt the shadows whispering again, taunting me, peeling back the layers of courage like flimsy paper, revealing vulnerabilities. "You're nothing without them. You're alone," they hissed, and for a heartbeat, I felt the truth cut deep. "Get out of my head," I shouted, pain flaring behind my eyes as whispers slithered through, straining my resolve. Thoughts churned inside, a tumult of doubt. Anguished memories clawed their way up, dragging me down in a vice grip of despair. Faces of friends I had let down, moments of failure that made me feel small and unworthy. They clawed at my mind, opening wounds I thought were healing. "Breathe." I reminded myself of the light that still pulsed within me. But just as I gathered the remnants of my strength, the shadows responded, their forms swelling as if in spite. The ground exploded in a shower of dirt as the main figure lunged forward, breaking free from its prison of darkness, eyes blazing with an eerie glee. "Welcome back to the abyss," it rasped, each word dripping with malice. The other shadows parted, making a way for it, curving around like vipers drawn toward their prey. Together, I whispered to myself, remembering the warmth of shared laughter, the strength of loving arms. I held on to those memories like a lifeline, pushing against the darkness, trying to drag me down. With a deep inhale, I stepped forward, letting the light surge once more. The warmth spread like a wildfire, overwhelming the frigid shadows. But even as I raised my hand, the main figure clashed against the barrier of light, sending waves of heat flickering out like a dying ember. I felt a surge in my chest, compelling me to stand firm. "I will not be afraid," I shouted, letting the light explode around me, illuminating the dark corners of the forest, blinding the figures swirling around. Yet they lunged forward, relentless, and the air thickened with tension. "This is just the beginning," they howled, like shrieks echoing from 1,000 mouths, vibrating in the ground beneath my feet. Terror twisted in my gut, but I pressed on, holding onto the light with everything I had. My heart raced, and with a determined growl, I refocused. "Enough of this," I cried, calling upon the memories, energies, and warmth that defined who I was. But I could feel the shadows clawing at the edges of my consciousness, their pull growing fiercer, dark tendrils probing deeper, tracing the lines of my thoughts, igniting a firestorm of doubt. "You'll never escape those who haunt you," the figure whispered, its voice like gravel crunching beneath weightless feet. Cracks formed in my faith, a deadly chasm opening beneath me. I gripped my teeth, fighting the urge to succumb, fighting against the creeping despair that touched the very corners of my mind. They were relentless, twisting moments of fear into chains that held me suspended in the trembling darkness. "No!" I shouted, unwilling to yield any ground, unwilling to allow shadows any more power over me. The old man beside me shouted encouragement, lifting his staff, channeling all his strength into the radiance. "You can do this," he urged, and suddenly, I saw it, got lost in the spark of light, lighting my resolve afresh. With everything surging in, I imagined the warmth, the embrace of love, every joyful moment unfolding like petals in a blooming flower, pushing against the stifling darkness. I focused on the beauty, the simple moments of laughter that had always been stronger than despair. My breath quickened as I spoke those cherished words aloud. You cannot take my spirit. You cannot have me. Howling in rage, the shadows began to retract, bending back like smoke against the force of warmth pushing through. Their desperate screams filled the night, echoing the dark truths hidden within, and I could feel their fury intensifying, their relentless pursuit morphing into something more sinister. A shadowy hand lunged forward, clawing at me, barely missing my face, and I felt an icy grip sneaking up my spine, freezing me in place. "You're weak. You're alone," it shrieked, but the old man's voice rang out, vibrant and grounding. "Stand strong. Remember who you are." Drawing all my energy, I surged forward with a cry, pushing against the dark barrier with every inch of light I had left. I felt the shadows convulsing back, their forms stretching like elastic bands about to break. But even as I fought back, I could hear the laughter of the shadows, chilling and surreal, echoing off in the distance as more began to materialize, funneling into the clearing like a dark waterfall. My heart raced, fear tightening around my chest. I focused on the light, readying myself for the next wave. But I knew in my gut that each dark figure was just a fragment of something more sinister lurking beyond, something waiting to pounce. Every shadow seemed determined to reclaim its place, and I felt their hunger as they swept closer in a whirling dance, beckoning me back into their fold. Just when I thought I could hold them off, the ground shook again, and from the shadows, towering figures emerged, faces full of rage and hunger, eyes like burning coals. They reached out with greedy fingers as if to grasp my very spirit and drag me down into eternal darkness. In that moment, time stopped, and I felt small, insignificant against their twisted forms. This is it, I thought, dread pooling deep in my stomach. But as fear wrapped around me, I remembered the strength I had felt before, the warmth of the light surging in me, ready to burn brightly once more. Drawing up my courage, I stepped forward, preparing for the battle I knew would come next. "You won't win," I shouted, holding tightly onto the memories that glimmered in my heart. The looming figures paused, the shadows swirling around them like smoke, and in that space between breaths, I realized this wasn't over, not yet. With each breath, the air felt heavier, thick with dread. The towering figures of shadows loomed closer, their shapes twisting and warping under the fading light. I could feel their gaze piercing through the remnants of my courage, and the whispers returned, louder and more threatening, wrapping around my thoughts like chains. At that moment, everything felt surreal, like a waking nightmare from which I couldn't escape. Each shadow seemed to come alive, shifting and undulating, creating a grotesque dance that sent shivers down my spine. I stood rooted, unable to take my eyes off their fearsome forms, and my heart raced like a war drum, a pulse resounding in the stillness around me. I tried to conjure the warmth I had held on to so tightly. Memories danced in my mind, but the fear was suffocating, almost overpowering. The shadows stretched out their arms, long and spindly, with fingers like claws reaching to grasp at my very essence. They pulled back the curtain of my past, unveiling pain I had tried to bury deep. Suddenly, I remembered the faces of friends I had lost, the laughter now silenced, replaced with hollow echoes that rang through my heart. "No," I murmured, shaking my head as if I could physically toss the memories aside. But the shadows seemed to grow stronger, feeding off my torment. "We will make you remember," they hissed in unison, their voices blending into a haunting melody that reverberated in the air. In a flash, tendrils of darkness lashed out, whipping around me like snakes. One struck my arm, biting cold and silent. I could feel it trying to pull me into despair, sapping my strength bit by bit. Panic surged through me, and I ripped my gaze away, searching for the fragments of light that still flickered in the darkness. desperately seeking a way to push the looming figures back. But as I looked, I saw the very ground beneath my feet darkening, shadows winding like ivy around the roots of trees, creeping closer, clawing up from the earth like they wanted to take me with them. "Give up," a low voice rumbled, heavy like thunder, resonating deep inside my heart. "You cannot fight what is already inside you." In that moment of doubt, I felt something cold and wet brush against my neck. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end as the sensation crawled like a chilling whisper against my skin. "They're here," I thought, terror curling inside me. I gasped, but no sound escaped. Only the approaching shadows continued their dreadful waltz. With my heart pounding, I turned my head slowly. What I saw made my blood run cold. Glowing eyes dotted the forest, watching me, flickering like embers in a dying fire. The trees around us warped and twisted, their silhouettes elongated, stretching into grotesque shapes. Shadows playing tricks on my mind as branches creaked like skeletal fingers reaching out. Suddenly, a guttural howl erupted from the depths of the forest, echoing through the clearing like the sound of a tortured soul. I stumbled back, fear ripping through me, causing everything in my body to seize. The shadows shifted, racing back, regrouping in a way that made my skin crawl. They were closing in, near enough to feel the chill radiating off their forms. I could sense the darkness regaining its strength, eager to consume me whole. The laughter began again, a chilling sound reverberating through the night. "Feel the emptiness," they jeered, their words cutting through the air like knives. "You are nothing. You always were." Each taunt sliced through my resolve. But deep down, I remembered the man's voice. "The light is your only defense." Gathering everything I had, I closed my eyes, imagining that warmth wrapping around me like a shield, pushing back against the encroaching cold. The warmth transformed into a blistering flame in my chest, igniting fury within my heart. I opened my eyes again, and the glow surged around me once more, brightening the shadowy figures. "You will not take me," I shouted, raising my hands toward the dark mass, feeling the heat ripple around my body. The shadows whispered, "You cannot fight it alone." Shadows began to split off from the main figures, swirling around my feet, chaos around me growing. I felt them slither closer, sinking into my mind, trying to drag me down, where despair lingered, where loneliness beckoned. "No!" I yelled again, my voice rising amidst the cacophony of dread, and my focus sharpened. I could not back down, not now. The air thickened. My legs trembled as I built up the strength, fueling the light with thoughts of everything I loved. Each burst of warmth propelled the light outward, and I felt it pushing against the shadows like a tidal wave. The darkness recoiled momentarily, a chorus of howls echoing in the night. They twisted back, their forms flailing like angry spirits trapped in a cage. But soon, they surged forward, even more furious, stretching and pushing against my defenses, whispering my fears like a chill in the wind. "You are just stalling. We will consume you." I glanced at the old man, who stood stronger now than before, his own light flickering like a small star against the vast expanse of darkness threatening to engulf us. Hope flickered in me with each look. "Together," I whispered, feeling the flicker of determination surge within me. The solid ground shook as shadows burst forth from gaps in the trees, overwhelming the remnants of light. They hissed and screeched, their voices melding into a terrible cacophony, creating an orchestra of terror that wrapped around my heart, squeezing tighter and tighter. "Feed us," they chanted, their hands reaching into the cracks of my mind, pulling at my self-doubt, forcing me to relive every moment where I'd felt weak, every mistake I had ever made, lying in a twisted irony as they took a form of my own unconscious fears. The shadows encroached again, shooting out an arm that caught my wrist like a vice grip, cold as ice. "This is where you belong," it growled. I could feel despair pooling around my heart, creeping with each pulse like a venomous snake, tightening. "You cannot escape the part of you that has always been alone." I fought against it, feeling the coldness seep in deeper, wrapping around my thoughts like a shroud, trying to pull me down. "You are nothing without us," it echoed tauntingly, its voice slinking through my memories, dredging up every shadow I had buried. In response, I pulled from the depths of my spirit, channeling every ounce of the light I had left. "No!" I screamed, forcing my focus back to the fight, back to the memories of warmth and laughter and love. Just as despair began to claw its way up my throat, I pushed forward, feeling the influx of light crash outward, forcing the darkness to scream. They writhed and twisted, their forms distorting and flickering back as the incandescence engulfed me. "You can't win," they shouted in a chorus of voices, but I refused to let despair penetrate my heart. My heart light blazed brighter, illuminating the shadows, trying to consume it. But even as I strengthened my resolve, new forms emerged from the dark, releasing an eerie fog that at first hovered, then wafted through the air. Their dark surface shimmered wickedly, catching the light just enough to reveal chilling eyes darting from beneath the drift. The fog slipped around my ankles, freezing me solid as a wave of icy fear coursed through my veins. Their laughter grew ominous, overlapping like a haunting melody, creeping into the very recess of my mind. Each laughter stirred the ground, causing branches overhead to sway as if the very trees mourned, their shadows elongating into gnarled hands ready to snatch at me. I felt tiny, shaking under the weight of creeping dread, knowing they were preparing for the final strike. With a heart-stopping crash, the shadows surged again, pushing forth with incoming force like a storm gathering speed. I felt a gulp of panic rise in my throat as I braced for their impact. "Stand firm," I willed myself, but the whispers began to echo in my ears once more, teasing and taunting. "You cannot hold them forever." Then, as if they had heard my thoughts, the shadows slithered up closer, their features shifting, forming a face that mirrored my own but twisted in agony. "We are always with you," it sneered, in every moment of fear and despair. It stretched out its claw, and the world fell silent. But still, I found strength in defiance. I would not back down. With one last burst of determination, I thrust the light forward. In that moment, I felt the fire ignite within me, strong and unyielding, ready to consume everything in its path, even the haunting reflections of my own fears. As the blinding light burst from my core, I pushed back, feeling the presence of shadows shriek in terror. Instantaneously, the dark forms began to dissolve, shifting and swirling like smoke caught in a strong wind. But the shadows fought back ferociously, clawing at my resolve, hissing intoxicating promises. "You will join us," they screeched, the fury echoing relentlessly. "We will never let you go." It was a battle of strength and will, and I stood firm, refusing to fall. But as the figures recoiled and then pressed in again, their howls echoed even louder. The ground beneath me trembled once more, vibrating through the air, echoing with an unsettling disquiet. The shadows drew back, forming a mosaic of dark shapes, ever shifting in the faint light, waiting for the moment they could surge with ferocity again. I could feel them circling around in currents of darkness, taunting, whispering promises of loneliness, unraveling everything I held dear. "Embrace it," they beckoned, bodies twisting grotesquely, merging in a way that made my stomach churn. "You cannot avoid your darkest self forever." The words slithered alongside me, creeping further into my mind, trickling into the corners of my thoughts. Just as I thought I had escaped their grasp, their voices intertwined like serpents, coiling tighter, suffocating every glimmer of hope I had left. The shadows advanced, and I felt it, their chilling touch creeping closer, reaching for my heart once more. Desperation clawed at me, and I realized these shadows were not just outside. They mirrored the darkness lurking within, those fears untamed and restless, eager to be acknowledged. As they neared, ready to snatch me into the depths of their relentless grasp, I hesitated for one brief moment. Then, I felt it pulse deep within, The flickering warmth was still there, waiting for me to harness its power, but it required courage to face my own demons. My spirit is stronger, I cried, channeling the courage brewing within. You will not win. With every ounce of strength, I forced my light outward, a blinding inferno roaring up around me. Shadows screamed in agony, twisting and writhing in ways that made their forms seem monstrous. But even as I competed against the darkness, I could feel the heights and depths of emotions colliding, my past clashing with my hopes. The two forces entwined, and as the shadows fell back, I saw them begin to fracture like glass under too much pressure. I had ignited the fight within me, and suddenly the shadows trembled, as if the light had exposed a truth they could no longer hide from. Yet just as victory seemed close, the air thickened again, darkening like smoke closing in. I heard the main figure's voice, a low growl reverberating through the stillness. "This is not over," it warned, its eyes glowing like fiery coals. I braced myself, feeling the intensity rising. The shadows lunged forward once more, filling the air with a wailing cry, desperate to reclaim what they thought was rightfully theirs. The battle of light and dark was far from finished, and I could sense the encroaching storm building yet again around me. I stood my ground again, heart racing, knowing I had to push through, facing not only the darkness outside, but also the fear brewing within. I would not let them win. As the shadows surged toward me, I could feel their breath, a cold, eerie whisper that slithered through the still air. "You cannot defeat us," they hissed, voices intertwining in a jarring symphony that rattled my bones. I was on the edge, perched between light and dark, feeling the raw power that rose from within like a tempest ready to explode. The shadows writhed like snakes, twisting and curling in the dim light, their eyes glinting with malice, hungry for my surrender. The fear wrapped tighter around my throat, choking me. I could hear their laughter, cruel and mocking, a twisted game they played as they approached, inching ever closer with every heartbeat. "Look at yourself," they jeered. "You are all alone, and we will always be here." Their words slashed through the ground, seeping into my chest like poison, each syllable laden with darkness that threatened to suffocate the light I had fought so fiercely to uphold. Even as I felt them encircle me, their energy pulsed in the air, storming toward me like waves in an unrelenting sea. Desperation clawed at my heart. The memories of love, friends, and warmth surged in my mind, battling the chilling reminders of despair that the shadows threw at me. I fought to reach deeper inside myself, to grasp that burning light one last time. Then, I summoned a fierce determination. "Not today," I shouted, my voice resonating wildly against the cacophony of shrieks and howls. The brightness exploded from my core. It cascaded out like a waterfall of fiery light, sweeping away the thick fog that had clouded my vision. The shadows recoiled, their forms distortions against the sudden surge of heat, flickering wildly like flames caught in a storm. Yet even as my light pierced through their bondage, new waves of shadows crept back, rising from the ground like smoke, a sinister mist that snaked around my feet, forcing their way into my mind once more. They wrapped around me, cold and clammy, and I felt the pull of despair lurking in the darkness they brought with them. "You will never escape us," they cried again, more frantic now, as they pressed closer, their icy fingers darting toward my skin, trying to seep in under my defenses. But I refused to let them close in any further. I clutched the light tightly, feeling it vibrate with energy, a furnace of hope against the shadow's chill. The battle raged inside me, a tangle of bright memories clashing against the darkness that twisted into everything I feared. I couldn't let go. I would not give in. "I am not alone," I growled, my voice like thunder echoing through the darkness. As I pushed through, vibrant bursts of light exploded around me, like fireworks dancing against a night sky. The shadows screamed, their faces twisting in agony as I drew on every ounce of warmth, fueling my determination. Yet there, Relentless advance felt like a weight pressing on my chest, a constant reminder of the fear I had fought so valiantly against. I could feel the darkness shudder, a violent shiver racing through its forms. They began to flicker, collapsing back beneath the force of my light. But I knew this wasn't the end. Just as I thought I could claim victory, the figures began to shift, and a larger shadow rose among them, darker and more menacing than all the others. It held a terrible weight of despair, swirling around it like a storm cloud, and its voice boomed like thunder. "Fool," it rumbled, "you think a mere spark will save you? You cannot outrun the shadows that entwine your very soul." Its presence dwarfed everything else, overwhelming, wrapping itself around my heart like chains forged from ice. For every glimmer of light that shone, it seemed to flicker and dim against the overwhelming darkness, mocking me as it pressed closer. The ground beneath my feet trembled, and the trees swayed, a sinister dance orchestrated by the powerful entity wrapping around me. Whispers surged like wind, and I could swear they were the voices of my fears, each one honed in on every insecurity I had ever suppressed. I felt the cold terror creeping back in, gripping my heart with a deadly chill. But then something snapped inside me. A pulse of defiance coursed through my veins as I roared against the shadows, more determined than I had ever been. "You don't own me," I shouted, feeling the truth of my words ripple outward. With each pulse of light igniting within me, I could feel the shadows falter, their forms flickering unsurely. I had to remember that the shadowy figure did not define me. It was merely a part of me, but it did not hold the power to control my destiny. The shadows hissed and writhed, and as their bravado faltered, I pressed forward, releasing the light with fierce urgency. "You will not take my spirit," my voice thundered, resonating fiercely in the night air. Every ounce of warmth surged outward, exploding into a vibrant aura of glowing light, pushing back the encroaching darkness. With one final push, the shadows shrieked, collapsing in on themselves before bursting apart like shattered glass, dissipating into the air in a whirlwind of dark mist. The heavy silence fell, leaving only the echo of my heartbeat, thumping loudly in the startling quiet. I stood still, breathing hard, trembling at the aftermath of the battle fought within. Yet even as I surveyed the surrounding shadows retreating into the depths of the forest, a chilling realization washed over me. Though I had fought bravely and won this round, a part of me understood the shadows would always be there, lurking in the edges of my mind, waiting for a moment of weakness to creep back in. But now, as the darkness faded, I felt a warm glow creep around me, illuminating the clearing, reminding me of the power of my spirit. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as the night darkened again, but I knew I was stronger now. The shadows could not consume me unless I allowed them to, and I would guard the light that flickered within me fiercely. With that determination burning bright, I turned away from the fading darkness, stepping forward into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever came next. My heart thrummed with courage, knowing that though the shadows may always follow, the light inside me would always have a fighting chance.